Chapter 940. Mei Suing, tell me the truth. Did you really see Yu Zhuochuan enter the valley? Jingyi yelled harshly. Mei Suing shuddered in fright. There seemed to be a kind of majesty in that rebuke. Disciple, disciple. Mei Suing said with a sobbing tone. Disciple, made an agreement with senior brother Yu. Disciple attracted Zhang Pinger and the others' attention so that senior brother Yu could enter the valley. Disciple, disciple. Really didn't see senior brother Yu enter the valley with my own eyes. How dare you? Jing Gang leaped up. How dare you? Another voice sounded. Elder Jing Gang, this is Mo Shen Palace. You have repeatedly provoked our sect. Could it be that, you know that we won't punish you? You. Jing Gang gritted her teeth. Sect leader, Yu Zhuochuan is my direct disciple and also your martial nephew. Why do you keep siding with an outsider? Sect leader, please be merciful and let me hack this guy to death. Let's see if he still dares to talk back. Shut up. Jingyi yelled. Elder Jing Gang, although Ren Xiaoyao is not a direct disciple of our fragrant cult, he is still a protector's disciple. If there is no real evidence, how can others be convinced if we kill him directly? Then just torture him. Our fragrant cult has many ways to extort confessions. I don't believe that he won't tell the truth. Nun Jingyi shook her head slightly. Eldest senior sister, I understand your feelings, but teaching is like running a country. You can't just do whatever you want. We can't torture a disciple just based on a few baseless words. Moreover, although Ren Xiaoyao's martial arts are high, he is still far from being Yu Zhuochuan's opponent. Senior sister's deduction is based on Yu Zhuochuan entering the valley. But what if Yu Zhuochuan didn't enter the valley? Oh right, did senior sister find anything in Li Chui Valley? Jing Gang shook her head. After receiving Mei Suing's report, I personally went to take a look. As expected, the ghost fog in Li Chui Valley was mostly gone. I didn't find anything strange. Did you search carefully? Yes, I did. I sent dozens of Ruijin Palace disciples to search the entire Li Chui Valley. There was no trace. Senior sister, that's right. If it is as you said, just relying on your God, it's impossible not to find any clues. You didn't see it and the disciples didn't find it. How could it be related to Ren Xiaoyao? But Sect Master Zhuokun was fine at Lingxiang Peak, but Ren Xiaoyao came and disappeared. How can I not be suspicious? Nun Jingyi sighed and looked at the silent Zhang Xiaohua. She nodded slightly and said, the aroma sect has been quiet for many years. Now it's like a stagnant water with no ripples. Not to mention the immortal Dao Senior in Huansu, even the Dragon Sect, the Righteous Dao Alliance, and that mysterious sect have planted spies in our sect. This time, when Xia Qing and the others returned from Huansu, they were attacked by the enemy. That day Xia Qing and the others were seriously injured. If not for my timely arrival, I'm afraid they would have died in the enemy's hands. If that's the case, when the enemy destroys these people like the dead disciples, where will we find them? Don't tell me you're going to find a disciple and torture him? It's a bit chaotic now. The disciples of Spreading Fragrance sect should work together to maintain order in the sect, not fight and scheme against each other. Mei Suing, you conspired with Yu Zhuochuan to plot against the disciples of our sect. You have violated the third rule of the sect. Fortunately, it was only a plan and not implemented. I'll warn you once. Go back to the hall and receive your punishment. I won't pursue the other matters. Thank you, Sect Master. Mei Suing didn't dare to say anything. She was already very lucky that Jingyi didn't delve into her relationship with Yu Zhuochuan. Moreover, from Jingyi's words, the punishment wasn't too severe. How could she not thank her? Jing Gang sat on the chair and watched as Jingyi dismissed everyone. She was furious. Although she wasn't certain, she had a faint feeling that Zhang Xiaohua was the one who killed Yu Zhuochuan ever since Mei Suing went to Ruijin Palace and reported to her. However, she didn't know why Jingyi was so partial to Zhang Xiaohua and didn't even torture her. It really puzzled her. However, she didn't plan to let Zhang Xiaohua go. When Jingyi waved her hand to dismiss Xia Qing and the others, Jing Gang rolled her eyes and said, Sect Master, there are dangers everywhere in the sect. All the disciples under us are busy and it's hard to find suitable disciples. Moreover, they are familiar with the entire sect and it's difficult to investigate them. Ren Xiaoyao is a newcomer and no one knows him. In my opinion, it's suitable for him to investigate the spies in the sect. Jingyi frowned and stared at Jing Gang for a while. She said, Ren Xiaoyao was injured in Huansu. We can't let him go down the mountain immediately. It won't be too late to let him go after he recovers, right? Jing Gang smiled. Moreover, Ren Xiaoyao is the guardian disciple of our fragrant sect. If we don't do something, I'm afraid many disciples won't be convinced. Yes, what senior sister said makes sense. Nun Jingyi thought for a moment and decided to give Nun Jinggang a way out. She nodded and said, Ren Xiaoyao, rest for a few days on Lingxiang Peak and heal your injuries. Then go down the mountain and have a look. This time you were almost attacked by the enemy. If you can find one or two among the many disciples, it can be considered as revenge. Zhang Xiaohua bowed and said, I'll follow sect master's orders. After I see Zixia, I'll pack up and prepare to go down the mountain. Hehe, junior brother Ren has a good plan. If junior sister Zixia knows, she'll be happy. Peacock, who had been listening carefully, said, Unfortunately, when junior brother went down the mountain last time, junior sister Zixia went into closed-door training and hasn't come out yet. I'm afraid she'll disappoint junior brother. Meng is in closed-door training? Zhang Xiaohua was a little regretful and happy. He asked, I don't know. At this time, Qinshin waved his hand and said, We don't know much about it. We only know that junior sister Zixia is in closed-door training and her time is uncertain. I'm afraid you won't be able to see her before you go down the mountain. Zhang Xiaohua touched his nose and said, Then I'll take my leave. I hope senior sisters will take care of her. Qinshin laughed, Zixia isn't just yours. She's also our junior sister. Don't worry and go. Zhang Xiaohua bowed and left Immerse Palace. He didn't have any injuries and had healed himself along the way. Why would he need to treat his injuries? However, Zhang Xiaohua was still in the house outside Immerse Palace. He closed the door for 3 days and 3 nights. He was thinking along the way, combining the sword playing the world in his mind and the human figure in the stone tablet, and carefully comprehending the sword controlling technique. 3 days later in the morning, the door opened and Zhang Xiaohua's tall and thin figure walked out of the house. At this time, there was only confidence in his eyes. It was as if the world was in his hands. Looking at the quiet surroundings, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and released his divine sense. The range of his divine sense wasn't large, only 100 feet. Immediately he understood the situation around him. Zhang Xiaohua suddenly frowned. About 70 to 80 feet away there was a hidden place. There was a disciple of Ruijin Palace hiding there and secretly looking in his direction. Zhang Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Then he pretended that he didn't know and took a stroll by the side of the house. Since Zhang Xiaohua came to Immerse Palace, he had been very careful and didn't release his divine sense. Now that he had something to rely on, he found something interesting. The range of 10 feet wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. Not long after, many disciples had passed by. Zhang Xiaohua didn't do it intentionally, but he found that there were fluctuations of heaven and earth yuan qi on most of the disciples. Why is that? Zhang Xiaohua was surprised, but after a while, he understood that the fragrant religion was a great religion left behind by the immortal Tao for 10,000 years. Moreover, it was under the protection of the array. Although the loss of yuan qi was great, there was still some of it left behind in the fragrant religion. Moreover, there were many artifacts of the immortal Tao, no matter if they were broken, scattered, or useless. Although these scattered artifacts were useless, it couldn't stop the disciples from liking them. Therefore, some of them carried the useless jade pendants on their bodies, and some of them inlaid the fragments of the artifacts on their swords. The fluctuation of yuan qi came from these useless fragments. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Compared to them, he was really poor. Just as he was thinking, a disciple caught sight of him from afar and quickly fled. What's the reason for this? Zhang Xiaohua almost wanted to touch his nose. Needless to say, the disciples of the Ruijin Palace must have been sent by Jing Gang. Why did the disciple who just left? Not long after, the disciple returned with something wrapped in yellow silk in his hand. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua, he said in a deep voice, Are you Ren Xiaoyao's junior brother Ren? Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He cupped his hands and said, That's me. May I know why senior sister is looking for me? The disciple handed over the thing in his hand and said with a smile, I am under the order of the hierarch to bestow this internal strength mental cultivation method to you. Internal strength mental cultivation method? Zhang Xiaohua didn't care about it in his heart, but his face was full of joy. He received it with both hands and said, Thank you for the hierarch's gift. Yes, the hierarch said that Ren Xiaoyao is our sex protector disciple. Although his internal strength isn't his forte, he can't be too vulgar. This internal strength mental cultivation method is practiced by the disciples of the Immerse Palace of the Incense cult. He needs to exhaust himself and work hard to cultivate it. Don't disappoint the hierarch. Thank you for the hierarch's kindness. Zhang Xiaohua bowed. He knew that this was his reward for bringing back Mo Qingshan's relics, so he accepted it with a clear conscience. Chapter 941. Also, Lord Cult Leader said that if there is nothing wrong with your injuries, you should go down the mountain as soon as possible. You have to be more careful along the way. Yes, Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, I will pack up and prepare to go out. Senior Marshal Sister, please report back to Lord Cult Leader. This disciple will definitely find out what happened. And I will report it as it is. The disciple nodded and turned to leave. After that, Zhang Xiaohua packed up a little and also rode down the mountain on the David's deer. Only the disciple of Ruijin Palace followed her for a while and disappeared. After leaving Lingering Fragrance Peak, Zhang Xiaohua became bolder. She released her divine sense and saw that the disciple of Ruijin Palace who was following her disappeared. She couldn't help but sneer in her heart. Nun Jingyi was the cult leader of Ruijin cult. Her martial arts cultivation was definitely something that Zhang Xiaohua couldn't catch up with even if she rode the David's deer. As for the Immortal Path's magical powers that she had inherited, it was estimated that many of them were also things that Zhang Xiaohua couldn't reach. However, if she were to encounter Nun Jingyi, Zhang Xiaohua only had two magical powers to protect herself. One was the Transfiguration Technique, and the other was the Imperial Wind Technique. Both of these were worse than Nun Jingyi's, not to mention Nun Jinggang, whose divine sense was much weaker than Nun Jingyi's. In addition, Zhang Xiaohua had just comprehended the true Imperial Sword Technique. Zhang Xiaohua really didn't put Nun Jinggang in her eyes. Of course, Nun Jinggang was the successor of Ruijin cult and had been immersed in the Immortal Path's cultivation for many years. There was always something that Zhang Xiaohua didn't expect. If Nun Jinggang didn't force her, Zhang Xiaohua would definitely not go against her. After riding on Huanhuan for half a day, Zhang Xiaohua gradually felt impatient. Although Huanhuan's leg strength was good, it was still lacking compared to the Imperial Wind Technique. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and found a place with lush trees to throw Huanhuan down. She also found a low-lying place to hide the Great Wisdom Heavy Sword. Then, she used the Transfiguration Technique and a handsome man with a moderate figure appeared. He laughed a few times and with a wave of his sleeves, he flew into the air and disappeared without a trace. An hour after Zhang Xiaohua disappeared, on a mountain path not far away, a gray figure appeared. This person was wearing gray close-fitting clothes and her entire head was covered. Her face couldn't be seen. Only the curves of her body could be recognized as a woman. The woman jumped onto a tree and looked up at the winding mountain path. She muttered to herself, "This is clearly the path. Why can't I see any trace of him?" Then she laughed and said, could it be that he knows? Did he go in the opposite direction? Then he turned around and went somewhere else? I want to see where he can go in the 19 mountains of Ruijin cult. As she spoke, the woman turned around and headed in another direction. When the woman had just left, about 500 feet away, on a protruding hill, a weak light flashed. Following which, a handsome man appeared on the hill. Looking at the woman's gradually disappearing figure, he frowned and said, Who is this woman? Is she chasing me? But then he laughed and said, how could she be chasing me? Maybe she's chasing that unlucky guy called Ren Xiaoyao. After that, he rubbed his nose and did the same thing as Zhang Xiaohua. Then he jumped and went in another direction. Wasn't this handsome man Zhang Xiaohua had disguised as the so-called Panin? After Zhang Xiaohua found her direction, she disguised herself and traveled with the wind. She traveled for more than half a day. In this half a day, Zhang Xiaohua rode the wind and performed the flying technique that she had just learned. The flying technique was the best technique in the Misty School. If one's cultivation had not reached a certain level, they would not be able to perform it. However, Zhang Xiaohua was indeed talented in the flying technique. She had comprehended it earlier, but her vital energy was limited and her cultivation was shallow. Thus she could not practice it well. This time she had gained some benefits in the ruins of Huanshu and started to practice the flying technique. She was just at the beginning, so it was the right time. Yes, it's here. Zhang Xiaohua, who was flying unsteadily in the air, saw a cliff and landed. It was the place where Xia Qing and the others were attacked a few days ago. Just when Zhang Xiaohua wanted to soar up again and take out the things he had buried according to his memory, his heart suddenly moved. He was actually vigilant. It seemed that there was some movement in the stone tablet he had refined. Oh no! Could it be that someone has discovered it? Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. She immediately went underground and went straight to the place where she sensed the danger. As she walked, Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. This place is so remote that I can't even see a single disciple. Only the disciples of the Ruijin Palace who are guarding the ruins of Huanshu may pass by. I just buried the things, how could someone discover it? When did my character become so bad? When Zhang Xiaohua was a little closer, she released her divine sense. Sure enough, at the place where Zhang Xiaohua buried the money bag, there was a person in a black robe. This person was tall and his whole head was covered by the cloak of the robe. Before Zhang Xiaohua could scan with her divine sense to see the face under the cloak, she saw the person move. He seemed to have sensed something. He suddenly turned around and looked around. It was an old man with white hair, a white face and slender eyes. The old man looked around with extreme vigilance. Then he used his qinggong to come to a high ground. Seeing that there was no one else, he muttered something. His fingers moved slightly a few times and he returned to the place where he stood just now. This old man can actually discover my divine sense? But why is he just standing there? If he wants to take out the things that I placed in the restriction, wouldn't he have to dig up the mountain rocks? As she thought about it, Zhang Xiaohua immersed her divine sense into the mountain rocks and looked at the restriction. It didn't matter as the restriction and things were still there. However, outside the restriction, there were actually many pitch-black insects. These insects were extremely small and black, just like a black fog. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but frown. This seems to have seen it somewhere before? At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua was alarmed. She turned around slightly and saw a wisp of black fog approaching her from less than 3 feet above her right hand. Ouch! Zhang Xiaohua didn't have time to think. He quickly formed a hand seal and dove into the ground. At the same time, an old voice coldly rang out, "Where did this thief come from? How dare you peep at me?" Then, the cold voice revealed a hint of astonishment. Obviously, he knew that Zhang Xiaohua had escaped underground. Zhang Xiaohua had escaped underground and wanted to heave a sigh of relief. However, when her divine sense swept behind her, she realized that the wisp of black fog had followed her. Since the black fog formed by the black insects could discover the restriction underground, of course, it could also chase after Zhang Xiaohua. Moreover, the insects flew very quickly and Zhang Xiaohua couldn't get rid of them while she was in the earth escape technique. After pondering for a while, Zhang Xiaohua formed a seal and headed towards the restriction. That old man could obviously see Zhang Xiaohua's movement through the black insects. He was slightly taken aback. Then, his lips moved slightly and a chanting sound was heard. At the same time, his fingers moved again. In an instant, a portion of the black insects that were hiding on the restriction secretly came out from the front. The old man had a good idea. He wanted to attack from the front and back, but his divine sense didn't seem strong enough. Perhaps he could only rely on the black insects to determine Zhang Xiaohua's movement. How could he be as agile as Zhang Xiaohua? Zhang Xiaohua made a few turns and left the black insects behind her. Then she found an opening and quickly swept past the restriction. When she got closer, she saw the black insect that was hiding on the restriction. It was smaller than a flea. One of its antennae was bent and pressed against the restriction. The 2 transparent wings on its back were flapping slightly. On the antennae, there was an even more subtle fluctuation. With this flickering, the restriction was corroded bit by bit. After seeing the appearance of the black insect, Zhang Xiaohua immediately realized that this was the mysterious black insect that she had extracted from Oyan's Mud Pill Palace on Shixin Peak. Could it be that this old man is the consecrator of Lingxiang Peak who had a conflict with Nun Jingyi? Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself, and her actions weren't slow. She pinched an incantation gesture and hit the original restriction. That restriction shone brightly and shook the black insect a foot away. Zhang Xiaohua took advantage of this gap and reached out her hand to take out the money pouch, belt, bracelet and other items from the restriction. Following that, she kept them into her bosom. Only then did she put down the stone in her heart. With a sharp whistle, she dashed out of the ground. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua rush out of the ground with a whoosh and float in the air, the already surprised old man's face became even more solemn. He stretched out his hand to reach for a weapon at his waist. However, just as his hand touched the weapon, he paused and immediately pulled out a small, sparkling and translucent jade ruby from his bosom. Holding the jade ruby in his hand, the old man then raised his head and asked in a deep voice, "This, young friend, this thing underground was discovered by me. Why did you snatch it?" "You discovered it?" Zhang Xiaohua saw that the old man wasn't afraid of her using the earth escape technique and the wind controlling technique and even questioned her. She couldn't help but become vigilant. Using her divine sense, she saw that those black insects had drilled out of the ground and were gathering in the air above the old man's head. They were black and faint and didn't move forward to attack. Furthermore, there weren't any black insects around her. She then opened her mouth and said, "These things were discovered by you, but you forgot that these things were buried by I." The old man was shocked and blurted out, "Where did you come from, Taoist priest?" Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and said with a smile, "You don't need to know where I come from. You only need to know that the things you discovered are mine. I'm going to take them away now." Hee hee. The old man rolled his eyes and shook his head. "You're mistaken, Taoist priest. You obviously came after me. If these things belong to Taoist priest, why would Taoist priest bury them here? With Taoist priest's magical powers, there shouldn't be many people who can do anything to these things, right?" Chapter 942. The old man's question was reasonable, and Zhang Xiaohua was at a loss for words. However, the reason could not be revealed to outsiders. Zhang Xiaohua laughed. "You old man, you're really unreasonable. If I said that this thing belongs to I, then it belongs to I. Why do you need a reason?" "That's right, Taoist priest is a person of the immortal Tao. Your powers are vast and you're not someone I can compare to. However, everything under the heavens cannot be reasoned with. If Taoist priest can't produce any convincing evidence, then I—" The old man did not say any threatening words, but the jade ruby in his hand tightened. Zhang Xiaohua scanned it with her divine sense. The jade ruby was also very lively. It should be an immortal Tao artifact, but she did not know what use it had. After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua smiled. "That's easy. Of course I can give you a reason. However, you have to tell I who are you." The old man was stunned. After thinking for a while, he said, "Since Taoist priest is asking, how can I not tell you?" "All right." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she reached out and took out Chasing Dream. She did not form any seals but threw it into the air. Then, she used her divine sense to control Chasing Dream according to the Sword of the World technique. Chasing Dream floated in the air. At first it did not move. Then it suddenly emitted a weak light. That light flashed and then extinguished. Chasing Dream suddenly moved. Like lightning, it shot towards the old man. The old man was looking at Zhang Xiaohua. When he saw her throw the small sword, he was already on guard. When he saw the small sword flying towards him, he was even more shocked. The fingers on his left hand moved nimbly as he chanted something. His right hand raised the jade ruby. A ball of light green light slowly flowed out from the jade ruby. However, before the light could shine, Chasing Dream had already shot in front of the old man. Chasing Dream was like lightning. When it arrived in front of the old man, it jumped back and retreated rapidly. It only stopped when it was 10 feet away. Then it jumped up and down in the air. Whoosh! Only at this moment did the brilliance of the jade scepter open. It was like a wall that blocked the old man's body. Zhang Xiaohua could not help but smile when she saw that the imperial sword technique was indeed extraordinary. It was only her first time trying it out, but the speed of the Chasing Dream was several times faster than when she did not know the trick to controlling it in the past. Following that, the Chasing Dream trembled again and the brilliance reappeared. At this moment, two identical Chasing Dreams appeared out of thin air, one in front and one behind. They were just as fast as before. With two consecutive bangs, the light screen formed by the jade ruby swayed and the old man's figure swayed along with it. The two Chasing Dreams intertwined and swooped down again. The old man's expression changed greatly. His left hand did not dare to be negligent. His fingers moved again as he chanted. Half of the black cloud above his head flew down and the other half attacked Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua did not have any expression on her face. She reached into her bosom and took out a fire talisman. She threw it out. With a ping sound, the talisman exploded around the black bugs. Sparks rained down and covered the black bugs that were attacking them. However, when the fire dissipated, the black bugs were still flying in the air. Not many of them were burned to death by the fire. Oh, could it be that these black bugs can only be destroyed by the delirium eye or little black? When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, her expression changed. Of course, little black was not by her side and the delirium eye did not have any movement. After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua made a hand seal. Zhu Ming immediately turned around and rushed towards the black bugs. However, there were too many black bugs. Although Zhu Ming knocked a few of them to the ground, it was like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. Most of the black bugs ignored it and swarmed over. Zhang Xiaohua retreated a little when he saw the black worms approaching. He extended his hand and took out the beast head paperweight. This thing had mysteriously subdued the fire crows in the ruins of Huan. Perhaps it would be useful. As expected, the moment the beast head paperweight appeared, the black worms instinctively paused. However, under the command of the old man they flew over again. However, their flying formation was no longer stable. Zhang Xiaohua frowned. Just like in the ruins of Huan, she channeled her vital energy into the beast head paperweight. However, this time, it was different from the ruins of Huan. The beast head paperweight did not suck in all the black bugs like it did in the past. Of course, it was not to no avail. As Zhang Xiaohua channeled her vital energy, the black bugs seemed to feel afraid. They did not charge forward but circled around a few feet in front of Zhang Xiaohua, rolling left and right. The old man was also stunned. He waved his left hand and hurried sounds came from his mouth. He seemed to be urging the black bugs, but the black bugs escaped his control and stopped. Unknowingly, the two of them were in a stalemate, or rather they were both feeling awkward and helpless. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua's eyes turned. She waved her hand and Zhu Ming split into two and flew back into Zhang Xiaohua's hand. Then Zhang Xiaohua flew back a few feet and laughed. How is it? Can this prove that this item belongs to I? When the old man heard this, he was stunned at first. Then he revealed an unconcealable joy. Although he did not dare to loosen his grip on the jade rui in his right hand, his left hand did what Zhang Xiaohua did. With a wave of his hand, the bugs that had turned into black fog flew back. When they reached the old man's side, they entrenched themselves on top of his head. Taoist priest, you are indeed skilled in the art of sword manipulation. I can't compare to you. Needless to say, just based on the fact that Taoist priest can control the flying sword inside, I know that this item must have been left behind by you. The old man said with a smile. He did not bother to distinguish whether the flying sword was taken out from the ground or not. Since we have identified the item, you can tell I. Who are you? Zhang Xiaohua narrowed her eyes and asked from afar. She did not move forward. She thought that the old man would beat around the bush. Who knew that the old man said loudly, I am Lei Hong from the Greenwood Palace. May I know who Taoist priest is? Then he asked with a strange tone, could it be the spring equinox or hibernation awakening? Zhang Xiaohua frowned and pretended not to know. She said, what spring equinox or hibernation awakening? I am Panin. Panin? When Lei Hong heard this, he pondered for a moment as if he was thinking about something. Then he asked, Senior Pan, forgive me for being slow-witted. Senior's cultivation method was not passed down by the fragrant religion. Moreover, your supernatural powers are obviously superior to the fragrant religion's Nanjing Yi. May I know? Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and sneered. How can you know I's origin? I just don't know why you are around the Huan Su if you are from the Greenwood Palace. Lei Hong also smiled and said, of course I am here on the orders of the sect leader. I am here on official business. Zhang Xiaohua did not believe that this guy could go against Nanjing Yi and attack O Yen. Of course he was not a good person. Maybe it was related to the sneak attack a few days ago. After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua put away the beast head paperweight. She cupped her hands and said, in that case you can continue with your business. I will leave first. After that, she made a gesture and used the art of riding wind. She went straight in one direction and disappeared in a moment. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua suddenly leave, Lei Hong did not dare to move. He still held the jade scepter and stood there quietly. After waiting for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, he commanded the black bug to circle around for a long time. He even checked the ground. After confirming that there was no trace of Zhang Xiaohua, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and muttered to himself in shock, where did this immortal senior come from? He looks quite young. How can he be so powerful? Maybe, he is not a hibernation awakening. This power. I am afraid that he is close to the few heavenly kings in the sect. Then Lei Hong shook his head slightly. Fortunately, this senior is not from the incense cult. Otherwise, it would be difficult. However, even if it is difficult, what can he do? He has not returned to the Tenryu sect for a long time. I am afraid that the heavenly kings have trained many experts. It's a good thing that he doesn't have a way to restrain this soul puppet of mine. Otherwise, this old life of mine would have to die here today. This is a big piece of news. Let's wait for the incense cult's restriction to be lifted and send the news out quickly. Don't delay the sect leader's plan. As he spoke, Lei Hong took out a coarse black bottle from his bosom and kept the black soul puppet. Just as he was about to keep the bottle, he stopped and released a small soul puppet. Then he held the jade scepter in his hand and used his qinggong to fly in another direction. After Lei Hong and Zhang Xiaohua left, there was only a gentle breeze blowing in this unremarkable place. No one knew what had happened here. 10 days later, on a mountain peak that reached the clouds, there was a sudden movement among the lush greenery. Between two trees, a ball of faint light flashed and a tall and thin man emerged from the ground. It was Zhang Xiaohua. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua had a smile on his face as he looked at the beautiful scenery on the mountain peak. He smiled and said, "As expected, there is also an 8 trigrams purple gold furnace on Kuanglu Peak. I have already gathered 17 alchemy furnaces. Only Jiuhua Peak has not been visited. I am curious, what is the use of these 18 alchemy furnaces?" Ever since Zhang Xiaohua obtained the belt and other items that were hidden underground and failed to win the battle with Lei Hong, he went to the 19 peaks of the incense cult. Kuanglu Peak was the second to last one. As Zhang Xiaohua expected, there was a hidden alchemy room at the peak of each peak. There was an identical 8 trigrams purple gold furnace inside. However, when he saw the 17 identical alchemy furnaces in the belt, Zhang Xiaohua was even more suspicious. No matter how bored the seniors of the incense cult were, they would never place an alchemy furnace on each peak. Moreover, they were identical. What was the purpose of these alchemy furnaces? The 17 pill furnaces in the belt were placed together, and there was a faint connection between them. However, if one looked carefully, there was no trace of it. After sitting in the forest for a long time, Zhang Xiaohua didn't want to go directly to Jiuhua Peak. For the past 10 days or so, he had concealed himself and practiced his flying technique while walking in the aroma cult. He also felt that it was quite tiring. Now that he had arrived at Kuanglu Peak, which was right next to Jinghai Lake, he couldn't help but have the thought of going to take a look. Chapter 943. Jinghai Lake was the place where Zhang Xiaohua first entered the fragrant religion. It was quite a large lake, and it was also the place where people entered and exited the fragrant religion. Zhang Xiaohua's immortal cultivation had greatly improved, and her divine sense was also a lot stronger. Therefore, she also had the intention to explore Jinghai Lake. Forming a seal with her hand, Zhang Xiaohua's body flew up and broke through the sky. Her figure gradually dimmed, indicating that her flying technique and concealment technique had greatly improved. The flying technique was indeed powerful. Although Zhang Xiaohua had just entered the sect, it only took her the time to drink a cup of tea to arrive at Jinghai Lake. From afar, Zhang Xiaohua released her divine sense. She only felt that the fluctuation of heaven and earth's origin energy above the lake was very strong. Especially above the lake, there were several fluctuations that swept across, and it was very chaotic. Zhang Xiaohua frowned and temporarily dispelled the idea of exploring the lake. She formed a seal and landed in the forest beside the lake. The forest was lush with branches and leaves, and the wind blew the leaves, creating a rustling sound. After Zhang Xiaohua landed, she did not use her qing gong. Instead, she walked step by step in the shade of the trees. The mottled sunlight penetrated through the forest, and it was particularly dazzling. Her feet stepped on the 1-foot-thick underbrush, and the rustling sound made Zhang Xiaohua recall many things. This was the place where Zhang Xiaohua first met the outstanding disciple of the Dan Repository Hall, Lu Lihong. It was also in the morning that Zhang Xiaohua saw the sanctimonious side of Lu Lihong. The dragon scale fruit that she obtained was also taken away by Lu Lihong. However, the things that happened after that were even more unimaginable. She met Lu Lihong again, fought with him, and was ambushed and killed by him. All of this happened in the span of a few months. At this moment, she was revisiting old memories. Where was the expert who deceived her in the past? He had already turned into a handful of soil in the Yulon Grand Canyon. Thinking about this, Zhang Xiaohua used her divine sense to check. In just a moment, she saw a lot of precious herbs in the forest. However, at this moment, Zhang Xiaohua disdained to pick them. Although the herbs in the Yulon Grand Canyon were refined in the Shixin Peak, the remaining herbs were enough for Zhang Xiaohua to use. Although the herbs in the forest were good, they were far from what Zhang Xiaohua had, so naturally, it did not attract her interest. Just when Zhang Xiaohua casually glanced around, suddenly an obscure fluctuation appeared, and in the blink of an eye, it disappeared again. Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. He focused his divine sense on the place just now, but there was no more movement. Could it be that I saw wrongly? Zhang Xiaohua thought with a frown. However, he still changed his direction and went to the place where the fluctuation came from. When he got closer, he found that the place where the fluctuation appeared was out of the forest, right next to the Jinghai Lake. Looking carefully, Zhang Xiaohua was surprised to find that it was the place where she and Chang Chang had set up camp. Could it be that there is something fishy underground? Zhang Xiaohua thought, and the obscure fluctuation suddenly appeared again. Just like before, it disappeared in a moment. Of course, this time, Zhang Xiaohua saw it clearly with her divine sense. It was a small bead under the ground not far away. Zhang Xiaohua used her divine sense to check the surroundings of the bead. After confirming that there was no danger, she walked over. The bead was not buried deep, and Zhang Xiaohua easily took it out. Looking at the gray bead in her hand, Zhang Xiaohua concentrated her divine sense and wanted to delve into it. However, the bead seemed to have a strange restriction. It did not isolate her divine sense, but when she tried to force her divine sense into it, the restriction shook violently, and a chaotic aura came out from within the bead. Suddenly, a sense of danger rose in Zhang Xiaohua's heart. Her expression changed, and with a flick of her wrist, she immediately threw the gray bead towards the Jinghai Lake. The bead shot out like an arrow from a bow. Even so, when the bead flew to the surface of the lake, the restriction on the surface of the lake was triggered. Before the restriction could activate, there was a weak flash of light, followed by a loud bang. The bead actually exploded on the surface of the lake, and the explosion caused huge waves to rise from the bottom of the lake. What is this? Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. If the bead exploded in her hand, wouldn't she lose her life? No matter how light it was, she reckoned that she would not be able to keep her arm. Is this something that was forcefully buried? Or was it buried by someone else? Zhang Xiaohua was about to ponder, but there was another movement, and a weak divine sense swept over. Zhang Xiaohua's expression changed slightly, and a fierce look flashed in her eyes. She seemed to have an idea. She pinched a spell and first she escaped into the ground. After a short while, a few disciples wearing the uniform of the Wuming Hall hurriedly rushed over. Before they arrived, they saw a woman wearing tight clothes. Her head was wrapped tightly, and she was using her qin gong to stand high above the bushes. After the explosion, the surface of the lake returned to normal. However, the restriction on the surface of the lake was even more chaotic. How could these low-level disciples of the Wuming Hall know about this? They checked for a long time, but they did not find anything, so they had to go elsewhere. When these disciples went far away, the woman hiding in the bushes revealed herself. Her exposed eyes stared at the surface of the lake for a long time, as if she was thinking about something. At this time, the sound of leaves swaying could be heard from not far away. The woman raised her eyebrows, stood up, and looked for the source. Ren Xiaoyao. Before the woman could get close, she saw Zhang Xiaohua's exposed back. She blurted out, "You are indeed cunning. I have been chasing you for a long time, but I could not find any trace of you. If I did not have a sudden impulse to come to the Jinghai Lake to take a look, who would know that you were hiding here?" Zhang Xiaohua heard the sound behind her, and she pretended to be afraid. She used her qin gong ethereal steps, and went into the depths of the forest. Ethereal steps? The woman seemed to be very familiar with ethereal steps. When Zhang Xiaohua used it, she saw through it. "I knew that there was something wrong with you. I did not expect your problem to be so big." Zhang Xiaohua did not look back. She controlled her speed, sometimes fast and sometimes slow, so that the woman behind her could not catch up. After the time it took to smoke a cigarette, the two of them went into the depths of the forest. The woman was so angry that she forgot to consider why she could not catch up to Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua continued to run forward until she found a spacious area. Zhang Xiaohua stood under a tree with her arms crossed. She turned around and said with a smile, "Great Elder Jing Gang, why are you chasing me?" When the woman heard this, she unconsciously stopped and changed her voice. She asked curiously, How did you know it was me?" As she spoke, she removed the cloth that was wrapped around her head, revealing her white hair and wrinkled face. "Ha ha ha." Zhang Xiaohua laughed. "In the entire fragrant cult, you are the only one who can't get along with me. Other than you, who else would care about a small character like me?" "Is that simple?" Jing Gang was stunned and asked in disbelief. "Of course, other than this, what else could it be? You changed your voice and clothes, but you didn't even let me see your face. If I didn't guess, how would I know?" Jing Gang slowly nodded and sneered. "Since you know it's me, you don't seem to be afraid. Why should I be afraid?" Zhang Xiaohua also sneered. "Lord Sect Leader knows how dissatisfied you are with me, so he followed your tone and sent me down the mountain. You went down the mountain without permission to kill me. Aren't you afraid of being punished by Lord Sect Leader?" "Punished?" Jing Gang laughed. "Let's not talk about the fact that I went down the mountain through a secret passage. Jing Yi only knows that I went into seclusion to cultivate and doesn't know that I went down the mountain. Even if she knew, I would have killed you long ago. What else can she say? It's just a few words of punishment. Do you think I would abandon the decades of relationship between us for a mere disciple?" Zhang Xiaohua held her chin and didn't say anything. Then she heard Jing Gang say, Actually, I was a bit anxious that day. If you hadn't found Mo Qingshan's relics and I hadn't listened to Mei Suyen's words, I would have lost my mind and only wanted to kill you to avenge Zhuochuan. I lost Jing Yi's face in Mo Xian's palace. You think I wouldn't have killed you on Lingering Fragrance Peak? But, Zhang Xiaohua said thoughtfully, you don't have evidence that I killed Yu Zhuochuan. How do you know that I killed her? Evidence? It's just something from the legends. As long as you have the slightest chance, this old woman will kill you and kill all the people who can kill Zhuokun. The real murderer will also be killed by this old woman. Jing Gang said with a sneer. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes narrowed. I'd rather kill 1,000 by mistake than let one person go. Great Elder, what a good plan. I, Jing Gang, kill people. Do I still need to plan? Jing Gang said proudly. That's true. Zhang Xiaohua put down her hand and said, there's an old proverb that says those who kill will be killed by others. I don't know if Great Elder has heard of it. Ah. Jing Gang laughed. I have heard of it but I don't understand. Ren Xiaoyao, you've said so much. You can die now. As she spoke, Jing Gang stretched out her hand and a long sword came out of its scabbard. Wait a moment. Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand. Doesn't Great Elder want to know whether I killed Yu Zhuochuan or not? There's no difference whether you killed her or not. It won't be too late to tell me after you die. Is that so? Zhang Xiaohua said as he reached out his hand and took out something from his bosom. When she saw the item in Zhang Xiaohua's hand, Jing Gang's eyes widened. She scolded angrily, Ren Xiaoyao, you brat, you actually got the purple phoenix hairpin. Zhuochuan was indeed killed by you. Give me your life. As she spoke, she raised her long sword. It was very similar to Shimujuan's sword. She was going to stab Zhang Xiaohua. That's not all. Zhang Xiaohua sneered and took out another purple phoenix hairpin from his bosom. He held both purple phoenix hairpins in his hands and waved them in the air a few times. He smiled and said, your two precious disciples have become ghosts in my hands. I'm afraid you will follow in their footsteps. Yu Zhuochuan left early and I'm afraid she couldn't wait for you. Shimujuan, on the other hand, is probably still waiting for you. Chapter 944. Mujuan? When Nanjing Gang saw the two identical purple phoenix hairpins in Zhang Xiaohua's hands, the shock on her face could no longer be described with words. She might have suspected that Yu Zhuochuan had died in Zhang Xiaohua's hands, but that was merely a suspicion. It was merely based on a woman's intuition. In fact, she herself was half convinced. However, she had never thought that Shimujuan would die in Zhang Xiaohua's hands. She had never thought that this would happen. Furthermore, Nanjing Gang had left the mountain alone to hunt down Zhang Xiaohua. Apart from her extreme hatred for Zhang Xiaohua, she also felt helpless. Ever since Shimujuan had left the mountain to train, he had never returned. Nanjing Gang's other disciples also had their own matters to attend to. They were all within Nanjing Yi's field of vision and could not be randomly assigned. Nanjing Gang had no choice but to leave the mountain herself. Otherwise she would have sent Shimujuan over. This was because, in her heart, Zhang Xiaohua was no match for Shimujuan at all. However, when she heard Zhang Xiaohua say that Shimujuan had been killed by her, Nanjing Gang could not believe her ears. However, the two purple phoenix hairpins in Zhang Xiaohua's hands were real. They had been bestowed upon Nanjing Gang by the previous sect master after she had received the inheritance. They had accompanied Nanjing Gang for many years and had only been given to Yu Zhuochuan and Shimujuan later on. Even without using her divine sense, Nanjing Gang could tell with her naked eyes that these were genuine purple phoenix hairpins. Her two precious disciples would never have casually disposed of such precious items. The only possibility for these purple phoenix hairpins to fall into Zhang Xiaohua's hands was that the two of them had really died in Zhang Xiaohua's hands. At this moment, Nanjing Gang could no longer be bothered to consider the reason behind her two disciples' deaths. She formed a seal with her left hand and Zhang Xiaohua felt the purple phoenix hairpin in her hand move slightly as if it was about to leave her hand. Oh no, this purple phoenix hairpin has actually been refined by Jing Gang. Zhang Xiaohua's mind raced. She swept the hairpin with her divine sense and put it into her purse. Seeing that the purple phoenix hairpin had suddenly disappeared and that she could no longer feel it, Nanjing Gang was even more shocked. Then a trace of understanding flashed through her eyes. You're from the Tenryu sect? Zhang Xiaohua shook his head. He had encountered such questions countless times. Only Lei Hong from the Greenwood Palace didn't ask him if he was from the Tenryu sect a few days ago. I don't care if you're from the Tenryu sect or not. After I kill you to avenge my two disciples, I'll settle the score with that bitch Zixia. I'd like to see how Jingyi will protect her. Nanjing Gang gritted her teeth as she spoke. She waved the long sword in her hand and her figure rose from the ground. She was going to stab the space between Zhang Xiaohua's eyebrows. Hearing Nanjing Gang call Meng a bitch, Zhang Xiaohua was furious. Her eyes narrowed and she reached out to take out Chasing Dream. Nanjing Gang's figure danced in the air. Her sword was very charming and it attracted all of Zhang Xiaohua's attention. It was as if only the tip of Nanjing Gang's sword was the most beautiful color in the entire world. She could only stand up and face it head-on. That was the only choice at this moment. This was the move that Shi Mujuan had used before. However, in Nanjing Gang's hands, its power had increased greatly. Putting aside the fact that Nanjing Gang's power had increased, just looking at the indescribable power of this move in her hands, it was definitely not something that a man like Shi Mujuan could use. Perhaps this shocking sword was created by the fragrant religion specifically for women. How could Zhang Xiaohua's mind be attracted by this? With that thought in mind, Chasing Dream in his hand leaped forward to meet the attack. Flying sword? Nanjing Gang almost blurted out. However, she did not dare to be careless. The sword in her left hand did not change. Instead, she reached into her clothes and took out a jade talisman. She crushed it and a faint white light immediately flashed. It gradually formed a protective light shield around her. However, Chasing Dream was not fast at first. When the protective light shield appeared, it immediately trembled and split into two identical small swords. At the same time, it sped up and flew towards Nanjing Gang's left and right sides. Before Nanjing Gang's protective light shield could be formed. When Nanjing Gang saw this, she could not help but be shocked. She finally understood Zhang Xiaohua's power. However, she was not nervous. She formed a hand seal and two weak divine senses appeared. One on the left and one on the right, they flew towards Zhang Xiaohua's flying swords. Zhang Xiaohua's divine senses had already covered the entire area. When he saw Nanjing Gang's weak divine senses, he could not help but laugh. However, when he saw that her divine senses could split into two, he was curious. Hence, he used one of the divine senses to change the direction of the two flying swords. One from the top and the other from the bottom, they pierced towards Nanjing Gang's body. However, Nanjing Gang's two divine senses were also magical. Like maggots, they followed the changes in the two flying swords and wrapped around them with great agility. At the same time, the long sword in Nanjing Gang's left hand was in front of Zhang Xiaohua's face. Even though he was facing Nanjing Gang, Zhang Xiaohua did not look as pathetic as when he faced Shi Mujuan. The tip of the long sword was like a dazzling meteor that was about to land on Zhang Xiaohua's face. Zhang Xiaohua immediately moved. He did not hide underground. Instead, he formed a hand seal that he had prepared beforehand. A faint light red light appeared in midair and blocked the tip of Nanjing Gang's sword. However, with a soft poof, the light red light did not stop the tip of the sword for long. It was pierced through by Nanjing Gang's long sword. The tip of the sword pierced through the light and continued to land on Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. Nanjing Gang sneered, "It's just the Tenryu sect's insignificant technique. How can it block my fragrant sect's ultimate technique?" "Is that so?" Zhang Xiaohua replied with a smile. Then he leaped into the air and flew into the sky. Levitation technique? Nanjing Gang was astonished once again, but the long sword in her hand missed its target. Even though her qinggong was good and her swordsmanship was amazing, she could not levitate. How could she catch up to Zhang Xiaohua? By the time Zhang Xiaohua rose into the air, the two Chasing Dreams controlled by his divine sense were already in front of Jing Gang Shirtai. Although Jing Gang Shirtai's divine sense was weak, her speed was not slower than Zhang Xiaohua's. Moreover, Jing Gang Shirtai seemed to have grasped the incense cult's immortal Dao secret art. She was actually able to block Zhang Xiaohua's flying sword. While both of their divine senses were locked in a stalemate, Nanjing Gang's light barrier formed around her body. Nanjing Gang's face had a trace of tranquility. "I didn't expect you to know the levitation technique. This is out of my expectations." When Nanjing Gang saw Zhang Xiaohua floating in the air, she kept her long sword and took out a palm-sized triangular object. She sneered, "It's a pity that I didn't know you were from the Tenryu sect. I came out in a hurry and didn't bring any weapons. However, this Sangharama plate is enough to take your life." Nanjing Gang was arrogant. Zhang Xiaohua stood in the air and sneered, "Let's try it then." As he spoke, he urged his divine sense. Two Chasing Dreams swirled around Nanjing Gang's body and rapidly pierced towards her. When Nun Jinggang saw this, she didn't reply. She silently chanted an incantation in her heart. Her left hand also formed a seal. The two strands of divine sense danced in the air in an attempt to block the flying swords. Zhang Xiaohua's face was expressionless, but he sincerely wanted to see the results of his 10 days of cultivation. He made another hand seal, and the two flying swords trembled again. Suddenly, there was a moment of absent-mindedness, and 4 identical flying swords appeared. They circled around and stabbed toward Jinggang Shirtai's body. Ah! Nun Jinggang's expression changed slightly. She stopped chanting the incantation and immediately, another divine sense appeared and wrapped around one of the flying swords. Fortunately, Nun Jinggang can only split 3 divine senses. If she split 4, wouldn't my flying swords be blocked by her? Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself. He had been cultivating the imperial sword technique and had improved in the past few days. He could split the chasing dreams into 4. Although there was still a long way to go before he could reach 10,000 swords, it was still a fundamental change. If he cultivated according to this method, he could definitely reach the realm of 10,000 swords. At this moment, when she saw that she could only split 3 divine senses and couldn't contend against Zhang Xiaohua's 4 flying swords, Nun Jinggang immediately changed her strategy. She used the 3 divine senses to guard and only waited for Zhang Xiaohua's flying swords to pierce through before attacking and blocking the flying swords. In the past, Zhang Xiaohua had only used flying swords to deal with martial artists. He had never seen immortals use their divine sense to fight with flying swords. For a moment, he was at a loss and did not know how to deal with it. He could only use his divine sense to drive the flying swords. Like a fly, it flew towards Shirtai Jinggang's body, randomly greeting her. After a few more minutes, the Sangharama plate in Nun Jinggang's hand gradually glowed. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to hesitate any longer. He tossed his hand and the dragon binding hoop flew out. The moment the dragon binding hoop was tossed out, it expanded and turned into a huge hoop that wrapped around Nun Jinggang's body. Seeing how powerful the dragon binding hoop was, Nun Jinggang calmed down. Her left hand stopped moving and she took out a small seal from her chest. She raised her hand and threw it into the air. It was a small seal. Following that, Nun Jinggang took out a piece of primeval stone from her chest and pointed at it. The primeval stone flew onto the seal and the seal suddenly expanded. It also flew up and blocked Nun Jinggang's head. The dragon binding hoop flew onto the seal but couldn't wrap around it anymore. My god, so this is because you didn't bring a suitable artifact? Seeing that Nun Jinggang took out an unknown seal and used a primeval stone to control it, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but sneer. If you took a suitable artifact, how could I survive? Nun Jinggang is being honest. Zhang Xiaohua counted the artifacts in his bag and didn't feel that there was anything worth using. He could only focus on controlling the flying swords and piercing them towards Nun Jinggang's body. Zhang Xiaohua's strategy was effective. He was controlling 4 flying swords, while Nun Jinggang only had 3 divine senses. It was precisely because of the advantage in numbers that Zhang Xiaohua gained. Under Zhang Xiaohua's wholehearted control, chasing dream stabbed into Nun Jinggang's body with a soft bang, in just a short moment. Chapter 945. The chasing dream dagger stabbed into Nun Jinggang's body like a bolt of lightning. This time, it was different from when Zhang Xiaohua used the dagger to fight against the mysterious bronze-masked old man. It was also different from when she fought against Shimujuan. The dagger's power was not on the same level. When the chasing dream dagger stabbed into Nun Jinggang's body, there was a flash of white light. The dagger was blocked and the light dimmed. This caused Nun Jinggang's expression to change. Even Zhang Xiaohua's face revealed a trace of a smile. Although the chasing dream was agile when fighting against the bronze-masked old man, it was easy for the old man to catch it. When it encountered Shimujuan, the chasing dream could not win against the long sword in his hand. It was only now that Zhang Xiaohua had learned the true art of sword manipulation. Only then did she know how domineering the immortal flying sword was. Just one slash was enough to dim Nun Jinggang's protective light shield by 30%. If she continued in a spurt of energy, wouldn't she succeed with just 3 or 4 slashes? Zhang Xiaohua was wild with joy. On one hand, she activated the dragon binding hoop and on the other, she activated 4 more sword lights. She continuously stabbed in from all directions. On the other hand, when she saw that 30% of her defensive light shield had been pierced, she could not help but panic. She hastened the activation of the Sangharama disc in her hand. As a result, the light on the Sangharama disc became even brighter. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, she frowned. Her divine sense discovered that there was not much chi of heaven and earth in the surroundings. She knew that once this Dharma artifact was activated, there would definitely be a different movement. After thinking for a moment, she formed a hand seal and her figure rapidly rushed towards Nanjing Gang. She also took out the nameless dagger in her hand. Nanjing Gang was stunned when she saw Zhang Xiaohua suddenly go against common sense and actually get close to her. However, when she saw Zhang Xiaohua's flying speed, how was this the levitation technique she remembered? She unconsciously clenched her teeth. With a piu sound, she spat out a mouthful of essence blood onto the Sangharama disc in her hand. The Sangharama disc absorbed the essence blood and shone resplendently. Soon after, a resounding sound was heard. Immediately, a large cluster of blue light appeared on the Sangharama disc. That light rose into the air. With a turn, it rushed towards Zhang Xiaohua, who was already very close to it. And where the light rolled, there was the sound of waves crashing of the shore. In Zhang Xiaohua's eyes it was different. The blue light had turned into a huge wave, covering the sky and earth as it came crashing down on him. It was not even 3 feet away from his head, but he could already feel the power of the wave. The power of the wave was different from the power of Zhang Xiaohua's Prajna heavy sword. It was a kind of simulation of chi of heaven and earth. It had a feeling that the world was filled with chi of heaven and earth, and there was nowhere to escape to. This. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. He had experienced this feeling in the weak water array. There was no better way to break it. At this time, when he saw it again, he immediately turned around and flew away. However, the blue wave did not give up. It chased after Zhang Xiaohua and rushed into the air. Zhang Xiaohua's flying technique could not be said to be fast, but the wave of chi of heaven and earth was even faster. With a hua sound, it rushed behind Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to be slow. He turned around and dodged the wave. A few water droplets splashed past and hit Zhang Xiaohua's arm. With a few chi la sounds, Zhang Xiaohua's sleeve was pierced, and the water droplets hit Zhang Xiaohua's simple robe. A wave of bone-piercing pain came from his arm, and Zhang Xiaohua almost grimaced. What kind of magic weapon is this? It's clearly a wave of water. How can there be water droplets? Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. Could it be that this wave of water is also real? Zhang Xiaohua's guess was right. There were indeed a few drops of primordial water hidden in the Sangharama plate. Each drop had the power of 1,000 caddies. The waves of primordial water were also very powerful. Otherwise, Jing Gang Nun would not have to fiddle with the Sangharama plate for so long. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was about to use the levitation spell to escape, Jing Gang Nun panicked. She wanted to chase after him, but then she came to a realization. She stood there steadily and focused on controlling the Sangharama plate. Zhang Xiaohua flew more than 10 feet away, and temporarily escaped the attack of the wave. He stood in the air with an uncertain expression. He could escape, but if he did, what would happen to his dream? Not to mention Jing Gang Nun's torture. Even Jing Yi Nun might not let him go. However, if he didn't escape, he wouldn't be able to do anything to Jing Gang Nun. The Sangharama plate. The attack was too strange. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know how to deal with it. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense was strong. He could still control Chu Meng within 10 feet. The 4 Chu Meng continued to attack Jing Yi Nun. Jing Yi Nun's divine sense was unable to cope with the attacks, and in a moment of carelessness she was stabbed by Chu Meng again. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was able to control the flying sword from such a distance, Jing Yi Nun's face turned gloomy. Needless to say, Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense was much stronger than hers. Seeing that her defense was about to collapse, Jing Yi Nun moved the Sangharama plate. A ray of light shot out from the plate and chased after Chu Meng. When the ray of light reached Chu Meng, it turned into a wave and slammed down. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense immediately felt the unparalleled power from Chu Meng. He couldn't help but be alarmed. He hurriedly controlled the small sword and flew back. The wave of light couldn't catch up to the small sword, so it circled around Jing Gang's body to prevent the flying sword from attacking again. Chu Meng transformed into 4 parts and floated in the air restlessly. Zhang Xiaohua's expression was extremely ugly. His arms had the strength of 10,000 jin, and he looked very impressive with the great wisdom sword in his hand. However, he had painstakingly tempered his bones and obtained the great wisdom sword by chance. Yet all of this couldn't compare to the other party's magic tool. Furthermore, he knew that Jing Gang's cultivation was inferior to his. Not to mention her divine sense, she didn't even know the levitation technique. However, the other party's strange magic tool was able to ignore this difference. At this moment, only the dragon binding hoop was still in the air. It was in a deadlock with Jing Gang's small seal. However, it was obvious that the small seal was controlled by Jing Gang's martial arts techniques. It didn't need to expend his true energy. What should I do now? Zhang Xiaohua narrowed his eyes. He was a little depressed. After thinking for a moment, Zhang Xiaohua waved his hand and Chu Meng flew back to his left hand. He then reached out with his right hand and took out a small mirror. It was the small mirror that he had used to kill Shimujuan and block the huge blade in the metal array. Then Zhang Xiaohua held the mirror with both hands. He naturally threw Chu Meng to the ground. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua had taken out a new magic tool, Jing Gang naturally became more cautious. However, when she saw that it was a small mirror from afar, she couldn't help but be stunned. Hence, even Zhang Xiaohua's action of throwing away the flying sword was due to carelessness. She pointed her finger and the brilliance that flew out of the Sangharama plate intensified. The sound of water within the brilliance surged, waiting for Zhang Xiaohua to attack. Zhang Xiaohua's face was as calm as still water. He circulated his true energy and poured it into the small mirror. He didn't know how to use this magic tool and could only use it according to his previous experience. However, after pouring his true energy into the small mirror for a long time, there was still no change. Of course, this was within Zhang Xiaohua's expectations. However, Jing Gang didn't know. She didn't know what was so special about Zhang Xiaohua's magic tool. When she saw that Zhang Xiaohua was rushing towards her with the small mirror in hand, she focused all her attention and prepared for battle. She gathered all the brilliance of the Sangharama plate in front of her chest and waved it forward, rushing towards Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua's expression didn't change when he saw the huge wave crashing towards him. He raised the small mirror and faced it head-on. However, when the huge wave approached the small mirror, there was no change. Seeing this, Jing Gang was even more alarmed. She was afraid that the small mirror would unleash a powerful attack. However, when the huge wave came into contact with the small mirror, Jing Gang felt an immense sense of danger. Without waiting for Nun Jing Gang to make a move, four identical dream-chasing swords suddenly appeared on her back and stabbed into her back at the same time. Zhang Xiaohua's face was also filled with joy. He retreated and flew back to where he came from. It turned out that when Zhang Xiaohua threw Zhu Meng on the ground, he had already used his divine sense to go around the range of Jing Gang Shirtai's divine sense and stealthily arrived behind Jing Gang Shirtai. Taking out the small mirror and holding it with both hands was just to attract Jing Gang Shirtai's attention to conceal Zhu Meng's movements. As expected, Jing Gang Shirtai had been tricked. Only when Zhu Meng had split into four did she notice. However, it was already too late. No matter how fast Jing Gang Shirtai's divine sense was, it was impossible for her to block the flying swords. The jade talisman that Jing Gang Shirtai had crushed earlier had already been pierced twice by Zhu Meng. Two of the four flying swords had already pierced through the light shield. When the light was extinguished, the other two flying swords had already pierced through Jing Gang Shirtai's back. Jing Gang was shocked, but she didn't have any other choice. However, there was no despair in her voice. Sure enough, when the flying sword stabbed into Jing Gang's back, they didn't pierce through. It turned out that it wasn't only Zhang Xiaohua who had a protective robe. How could the fragrant cult's great elder not have a personal protective robe? However, just as Jing Gang heaved a sigh of relief, Zhu Meng, who was sticking to her back, lifted the tip of the sword. It was just like how Zhang Xiaohua used to hold Zhu Meng or how she used to control the sword. With a woo sound, the sword suddenly stabbed towards Jing Gang's neck from a strange angle. The flying sword's angle was very tricky and its speed was very fast. Nun Jing Gang had just released her spiritual sense to wrap around the other flying sword when this fatal flying sword easily bypassed her spiritual sense. No, Jing Gang's eyes were about to crack. Soon after, a look of hatred appeared on her face. Just before Zhu Meng pierced the back of her neck, she spat out another mouthful of essence blood and desperately activated the Sangharama plate. The surging waves howled as they pounced toward Zhang Xiaohua. Chapter 946. Zhang Xiaohua used the small mirror to attract Nun Jing Gang's attention. Once the flying sword pierced Nun Jing Gang's back, he would immediately retreat. It was a pity that he did not expect Nun Jing Gang to have a defense close to her. This sword did not succeed and he had no choice but to use his original move. In this moment of delay, he lost the opportunity and was unable to completely escape the area of the wave. What made Zhang Xiaohua even more shocked was that Nun Jing Gang was also a powerful character. When she saw that the situation was not going well, she actually had the thought of dying together with Zhu Meng. She did not care about Zhu Meng who was piercing the back of her neck. Instead, she spat out a mouthful of essence blood and used all her might to activate the Sangharama plate. At this moment, The monstrous wave was even bigger and the force contained in the water was also greater. Zhang Xiaohua's intuition told him that if the wave hit him, wouldn't he be smashed into meat paste? However, at this moment the wave was already right in front of him. It was too late for him to escape. Regardless of whether it was the flying technique or the earth escape technique, they were all useless. Helpless, Zhang Xiaohua could only raise the small mirror and pour all the vital energy in his body into it. The small mirror did not change at all under the infusion of vital energy. When the wave formed by the Xiantian primordial water hit the small mirror for about 3 inches, a ball of light blue light suddenly rose up. The color of the light was similar to the color of the wave. Following the appearance of the light, a huge suction force appeared from the small mirror and pulled the vital energy that Zhang Xiaohua poured into it. Not only that, the entire small mirror was like a bottomless pit as it continuously sucked in the vital energy in Zhang Xiaohua's body. In just a moment, the vital energy that Zhang Xiaohua had obtained in the Huansu was completely sucked dry by the small mirror. Zhang Xiaohua's meridians, which had been forcefully absorbed by the true qi, had ruptured in many places. A heart-wrenching pain was transmitted into Zhang Xiaohua's mind, and he could not help but grit his teeth. After absorbing all of Zhang Xiaohua's jinqi, the blue brilliance of the small mirror became even more dazzling. With a loud clang, the blue brilliance soared into the sky and collided with the monstrous waves. Then, just like a real wave with a walla sound, Zhang Xiaohua felt a tremor in her hand. An incomparably huge force was transmitted from her hand. Gritting her teeth, Zhang Xiaohua exerted all of her strength in both hands and desperately pushed upwards. That blue brilliance actually resisted the monstrous waves. It was as if the monstrous waves had collided with an incomparably hard shore. Just as the huge wave flowed backwards, Zhang Xiaohua's chasing dream, which was stabbing towards the back of Abbess Jinggang's neck, was also inserted as expected. However, at this moment, Jinggang Nun no longer paid attention to the flying sword behind her. She just opened her eyes wide and looked at the small mirror in Zhang Xiaohua's hand. She said in disbelief, "How Tian mirror? How did it become?" Before she could finish her sentence, chasing dream had already pierced through her neck, and she could no longer say another word. When Jinggang Nun fell to the ground, her eyes were still wide open. It was unknown whether she was unwilling to die like this, or she could not believe what she had just seen. In short, the palace master of the Ruijin Palace of the Spreading Incense Cult, the great elder of the Spreading Incense Cult, Jinggang Nun, was killed on the spot by Zhang Xiaohua, who had no reputation in the pugilistic world. Without Jinggang Nun's control, the brilliance of the Sangharama plate was immediately extinguished. The monstrous waves instantly rolled back, and with the sound of water, they were sucked into the Sangharama plate. The brilliance of the small mirror in Zhang Xiaohua's hand was instantly retracted, and it returned to its normal state. The small seal on top of Jinggang Nun's head fell to the ground silently. With a plop, as Jinggang Nun fell to the ground, Zhang Xiaohua also sat on the ground. This battle of life and death could be said to have exhausted him. Although it was only a short battle, Zhang Xiaohua truly understood that the battle of immortal Tao was not only a battle of cultivation, but also a battle of spells and weapons. Most importantly, it was a battle of wits. Sitting on the ground, Zhang Xiaohua took out a vitality stone. As he absorbed the vitality to replenish his vital qi, he recalled the battle with lingering fear in his heart. Early on, during the battle with Shimujuan, Zhang Xiaohua gradually understood the cruelty of the battle of immortal Tao. Then, during the probing battle with Lei Hong, he gradually understood the essence of the battle of wits. Although Lei Hong's cultivation was not only 1 star lower than Zhang Xiaohua's, it was difficult for Zhang Xiaohua to successfully kill a spiritual puppet without injuring himself without using the delusion breaker Dharma Eye. Therefore, when he encountered Jinggang Nun's pursuit this time, Zhang Xiaohua changed his previous battle strategy right from the start. In the past, when Zhang Xiaohua made a move, he would test out his Dharma artifacts one by one. He would even throw out jade talismans one by one. Of course, this was useful to a certain extent, but it also indirectly exposed his strength and the Dharma artifacts he had, allowing his opponent to be fully prepared. Therefore, when Zhang Xiaohua heard that Jinggang Nun did not bring any handy weapons this time, he muttered in his heart. Needless to say, Jinggang Nun was Shimujuan and Yuzhuochuan's master. Whatever Shimujuan had, Jinggang Nun would definitely have. She definitely had more defensive jade talismans than Shimujuan, and they were of a higher level. If Zhang Xiaohua used the offensive jade talismans like before, Jinggang Nun would definitely have more defensive jade talismans and even better defensive techniques. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua did not use any jade talismans, regardless of whether they were offensive or defensive. This caused Jing Gangnan to misunderstand that Zhang Xiaohua did not have any jade talismans. Therefore, after crushing one defensive jade talisman, Jing Gangnan did not crush a second one. Also, when Zhang Xiaohua started to drive the flying sword, she used both her divine sense and spells. This also caused Jing Gangnan to misunderstand that Zhang Xiaohua's flying sword could only be driven by the spells of her fingers. When Zhang Xiaohua threw Zhu Meng on the ground and raised the small mirror with both hands, she did not notice where Zhu Meng went. These were all things that Zhang Xiaohua had considered when the fight started. Especially after Zhu Meng broke through 30% of Jing Gang's defense with one sword, Zhang Xiaohua knew that this plan had a chance of success. Therefore he prepared to carry it out. Step by step, according to his plan, he made Jing Gangnan fall into his trap. Of course, this plan was very shallow. As long as Jing Gangnan crushed another defensive jade talisman, Zhang Xiaohua might have to flee. This was related to Zhang Xiaohua's experience in fighting immortals, and more importantly, to Jing Gangnan's lack of experience in fighting immortals. Zhang Xiaohua did not use the defensive jade talisman and the crimson spirit protection because he wanted Jing Gangnan to forget about defense. In the end, Jing Gangnan really forgot. However, Zhang Xiaohua's plan was flawless, but he still ignored Jing Gangnan's madness and her determination to destroy everything. If Zhang Xiaohua did not have the crimson spirit protection and the defensive light shield, the giant wave of the Sangharama plate would definitely take Zhang Xiaohua's life. Fortunately, the so-called Hao Tian mirror in Zhang Xiaohua's hand could actually reflect the giant wave. If not, even if Zhang Xiaohua stabbed Jing Gangnan to death, he would also die under the Sangharama plate. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua had already replenished a portion of his vital qi. When he fought with Jing Gangnan just now, although there was no sound, there was still some light from the celestial device. It was possible that the patrolling disciples of Wuming Hall would discover it. It was not good to stay here for long. Zhang Xiaohua kept the small mirror, dragon binding hoop and chasing dream. Then he picked up the Sangharama plate and the small seal on the ground and looked at them with interest. After that, he threw them into his belt. As for Jing Gangnan's corpse, it was lying on the ground. Her eyes were wide open, making Zhang Xiaohua feel uncomfortable. Great Elder Jing Gang, perhaps it was because of your indulgence that led to today's outcome. If it was not because of your protection, Yu Zhuochuan would not have met me and would not have asked me about the matter between Zhang Pinger and me. Even if you wanted my life, I would not have killed Yu Zhuochuan. As for Shimujuan, this fellow was not wronged. He actually wanted to snatch my dream? It was already a blessing that I did not kill him. He actually wanted to kill me? Who do you think I should blame? You are even better. You did not even have evidence that I killed him. You wanted to take my life just based on a sentence from someone else. You even did it in front of His Excellency the Hierarch. Speaking of which, it is funny. You are the great elder of the Hierarch. You have countless methods to take my life. However, you have a guilty conscience and do not dare to make things difficult for me in public. That is why you use such methods behind my back. Sigh, it is a pity that you personally chased me for more than 10 days. In the end, you still died in my hands. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Nanjing Gang's corpse. Endless feelings of karma welled up in her heart. After a moment, she sighed. She stretched out her hand, wanting to throw out a fire talisman. However, just as she was about to throw it out, she subconsciously paused. She thought to herself, this Nanjing Gang is not Shimujuan or Yu Zhuochuan. If they die, they die. If they go missing, then they go missing. Nanjing might not care too much about them. However, Nanjing Gang is a well-known figure in the cult of fragrance. She is His Excellency the Hierarch's great senior sister. How could Nanjing not look for her? If I don't have her corpse, Nanjing will definitely suspect me. After all, I was the only one who had a conflict with Nanjing Gang in Immerse's palace. It was very disadvantageous for me. If I keep Abbess Jing Gang's corpse, Abbess Jing will know at a glance that it was done by someone from the immortal Tao. Haha, the first thing she would think of would be the Heavenly Dragon sect. Why would she think of a nobody like me? With that thought, Zhang Xiaohua chuckled. She took out the Sangharama plate and the small seal from her waist and casually threw them on the ground. She looked around to make sure there were no loopholes. She then formed a hand seal and prepared to fly away. However, just as he flew out 100 feet, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to have thought of something and turned around to return. Zhang Xiaohua landed on the ground and kept the small seal and the Sangharama plate in her belt. Then she released her divine sense and scanned Nanjing Gang's body. She then took out the nameless short sword and slashed it across Nanjing Gang's chest. Immediately, several jade talismans and 2 jade slips slipped out from the slit in her clothes. Calm, there are more chapters. Chapter 947. Several days later, Zhang Xiaohua was sitting cross-legged on the towering Jiuhua Peak. His eyes were looking ahead at the seemingly endless sea of clouds and the red-crowned cranes that occasionally rushed out from the clouds. His eyes were filled with a smile. Ever since he killed Jing Gang Shirtai, Zhang Xiaohua immediately fled. He first used a flying technique to fly to the faraway Yanluo Peak. He showed himself at Yanluo Peak and used Mo Xian Palace's guardian disciple token. Accompanied by a few Heaven and Earth Hall disciples, he asked a few questions and saw the scenery of Yanluo Peak. After resting for half a day, he left the mountain under the respectful escort of those disciples. Afterwards, Zhang Xiaohua did not stop and ran to a few nearby peaks. It was really a coincidence that he met the Tenryu sect's disciple that he saw outside Huansu. Zhang Xiaohua took advantage of that disciple's unpreparedness and suddenly stopped him. He wanted to use Bewitching Finger to make that disciple speak the truth. However, that disciple seemed to have received some special training. He spoke hesitantly and was not very clear. Not to mention the situation of the Tenryu sect in the Tenryu sect, he couldn't even ask anything about the Tenryu sect itself. Instead, he knew the situation of the other sects in the Tenryu sect and did not hide anything. This made Zhang Xiaohua not know whether to laugh or cry. He was just looking for the spies of the other sects in the Tenryu sect. As a result, it could be said that he hit the mark by a fluke and knew quite a lot. It turned out that other than the Tenryu sect had the most spies in the Tenryu sect. Moreover, from what this disciple of the Tenryu sect had said, that mysterious power had been in the Tenryu sect for a long time. Over the years, the number of spies that had infiltrated the Tenryu sect was second only to the Tenryu sect. Of course, other than the two sects that Zhang Xiaohua already knew, the Dalan Temple, the Misty School, the Righteous Alliance, and other sects that had some reputation in Jianghu had more or less sent people to the Tenryu sect. This situation was not only known by this disciple of the Tenryu sect, but also by Mo Shuigong. A few years ago, the head of the Tenryu sect had ordered the Ruijin Temple to encircle and annihilate the spies on a large scale. However, these spies were like weeds on the plains. After the encirclement and annihilation, they rose up again in just a few years. After the encirclement and annihilation, the Tenryu sect stopped. In any case, the Tenryu sect had similar spies in the other sections. These spies only passed on information to the outside world and didn't do anything big. The other sects also turned a blind eye to them. After knowing this, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel a bit apprehensive. The things he had done were all sensational, especially when he killed Nanjing Gang. If it was an ordinary Tenryu sect spy, they definitely wouldn't make a move. He didn't know if he could shift the blame to the Tenryu sect. However, although that disciple didn't mention the leader of the Tenryu sect spies in the incense cult, when he thought about what Lei Hong from the Greenwood Palace said, there was an 80 to 90% chance that it was him. Moreover, he had actually tried to harm Mo Yen. Letting him take the blame could be considered a light punishment. Afterwards, Zhang Xiaohua followed the disciple's words and walked through several mountain peaks, searching for all the people he thought were spies. With Zhang Xiaohua's immortal Dao concealment technique, no one was able to find any trace of him. Under the influence of Bewitching Finger, those disciples said a few more things. These things didn't deviate from the Tenryu sect's words, but they were more detailed. In the end, Zhang Xiaohua arrived at Jiuhua Peak with the last 8 trigrams violet gold furnace in his mind. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua was sitting at the top of Jiuhua Peak and using his divine sense to sense the 18 trigrams violet gold furnaces in his belt that had a mysterious connection. He thought to himself, now that I've obtained all of the 8 trigrams violet gold furnaces and placed them together, nothing strange has happened. I've also carefully examined all of the furnaces. They're all exactly the same. Even the refinement chants on the inner walls are the same. Moreover, just now, I refined all of the 8 trigrams violet gold furnaces again and spat out the last of my true life origin. However, I only gained a faint connection with them. I only know that these 18 pill furnaces must have a special use, but I don't know what they're used for. So I forget it. The time hasn't come yet. Zhang Xiaohua sighed and took out a jade slip from his pocket. This jade slip was from Nanjing Gang. When Zhang Xiaohua was about to leave, he suddenly remembered that he had 2 violet phoenix hairpins in his pouch. They belonged to Nanjing Gang in the past. Since she could control them, she naturally had a method to refine them. Therefore, he turned around and found 2 jade slips on Nanjing Gang's body. As expected, the jade slip contained the method to refine the violet phoenix hairpins. Of course, this jade slip was something from the incense cult. Other than the violet phoenix hairpins, there was also the Sangharama plate that he had just obtained. Even the small seal, the devil exorcism seal, had a method to refine them. However, Zhang Xiaohua had been in a hurry these past few days. Moreover, he was worried that the incense cult's artifact would emit a unique aura if he refined it. Therefore he didn't refine it. After all, the current situation was somewhat dangerous and it was better to avoid trouble first. At the back of the jade slip, there were a few simple pill recipes. They weren't for healing. Zhang Xiaohua roughly looked at them and guessed that they should be classified as poison or confusion. The herbs used were also very strange and were quite similar to the ones he had obtained in the Ghost Valley. However, Zhang Xiaohua wasn't interested in them. With a wave of his hand he kept the jade slip into his pouch. Then Zhang Xiaohua took out another jade slip. This jade slip was also from Nanjing Gang. However, at this time, when Zhang Xiaohua immersed his divine sense into it and finished reading the contents, he couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. I was wondering why Nanjing Gang's divine sense was so weak and could be divided into 3 parts. Each part could be controlled individually and could even block my flying sword. As for Jing Gang Shirtai, she was able to extend her divine sense from afar and entangle my great wisdom sword as if it had a shape. It turns out that Zhuanxiang cult has such a miraculous technique that can split one's divine sense into small divine senses. Furthermore, this divine sense can actually leave the body and have other wonderful uses. Compared to the divine sense imprint in God's Guide, each has its own merits. However, this divine sense manipulation technique can infinitely find divine sense. If this technique is cultivated to the realm of great success, it can actually control several types of magic tools and attack at the same time. In the Battle of the Immortal Tao, this is an extremely powerful divine ability. After Zhang Xiaohua understood the importance of magic tools in the Battle of the Immortal Tao, he was extremely sensitive to the effects of this technique. In his battle with Nanjing Gang, in the end, because he was distracted to control Chasing Dream, he couldn't use the flying technique at the same time. His body paused for a moment, but it was this moment that almost caused him to be consigned to eternal damnation and suffer the same fate as Nanjing Gang. If he had learned this divine sense manipulation technique earlier, with one divine sense controlling the flying sword and the other controlling the dragon binding ring, wouldn't he be able to easily retreat? Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua's eyes unconsciously lit up. 10,000 swords shooting at the same time was of course the highest realm of the sword of the world. Right now he was only able to split one into 4. If he mastered the divine sense manipulation technique, then, would he be able to use one strand of divine sense to control the flying sword? Would this flying sword be able to split into 4? If he could split many strands of divine sense, wouldn't each strand of divine sense be able to control one flying sword? Splitting one into 4? The more Zhang Xiaohua thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. He knew the power of flying swords. Now that he lacked defensive magic tools, the more he could control these flying swords, the more powerful their attacks would be. This divine sense manipulation technique was tailor-made for him. Unfortunately, this divine sense manipulation technique only split and controlled divine sense, but it didn't have a way to train divine sense. This made Zhang Xiaohua a little depressed. Although God's guidance could strengthen divine sense and cultivate the heart of herbalism, Zhang Xiaohua's cultivation of God's guidance seemed to have reached a bottleneck. Although he had been working hard, there hadn't been any obvious progress. The expansion of his divine sense was only due to the increase in his cultivation level. But why is Nanjing Yi's divine sense so strong? Could it be that it isn't due to this divine sense manipulation technique? Zhang Xiaohua thought gloomily. Although it was just a thought, Zhang Xiaohua still made a hand seal and entered the alchemy room he had just found. Then he immersed his divine sense into the jade slip and read the divine will cultivation method in detail. Then he began to cultivate. The day passed quickly. When the sun was setting, Zhang Xiaohua came out of the alchemy room. Just as he was about to fly into the sky, he suddenly slapped his forehead and landed on the ground. I have already obtained the 18 pill furnaces and investigated the spies of the various sections. What else do I need to do? Meng is currently in seclusion and I don't know if she has come out yet. If I return to Lingering Fragrance Peak, I won't be able to see Meng. Even Nanjing Gang's matter will implicate me. Rather than attracting Nanjing Yi's attention in Emo Palace, why don't I take a stroll around the Spreading Fragrance sect and wait for Nanjing Yi's attention to the Tenryu sect before returning to gather information on the spies? Furthermore, this is already 9 Radiance Peak. I remember that the Tenryu sect disciple mentioned that there is a strange place in the Jade Mine under 9 Radiance Peak. It might be a passageway that leads to the outside of the Spreading Fragrance sect. Why don't I go down and take a look? It would be best if there is a passageway there. If there isn't, I can at least get some good jade stones. It's worth it. With that thought, Zhang Xiaohua concealed herself and flew into the depths of 9 Radiance Peak. Although Zhang Xiaohua did not know where the entrance to the mineral vein was, it was dusk now. Teams of Shuyu Hall disciples were returning from the mineral vein. As long as they went in the opposite direction, it would be easy to find it. Sure enough, it didn't take long for them to find a heavily guarded place. Indeed, this place was not a cave as Zhang Xiaohua had imagined. Instead, it was a gorgeous courtyard at the foot of the mountain. Could it be that I made a mistake? Just as Zhang Xiaohua was thinking, she saw the door of the inner courtyard open. A pair of exhausted Shuyu Hall disciples filed out. Their attire was different from what Zhang Xiaohua had seen earlier. It was coarse and dusty. Chapter 948. After the group of disciples came out, they were not in a hurry to go to the main door. Instead, they split up and entered the small houses on both sides of the courtyard. When Zhang Xiaohua scanned the houses with his divine sense, he laughed involuntarily. Wasn't that the place for washing up? Not long after, someone came out in a clean and tidy Shuyu Hall uniform. He came to the main door and the guard at the door skillfully searched the disciple. He waved his hand and let the disciple out. Then all the disciples were checked before they went up the mountain in groups. Oh, so this is the entrance to the jade mine. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and made a hand seal. He went underground and dived into the courtyard. However, when he reached the belly of the mountain, he encountered a layer of restriction that blocked Zhang Xiaohua's way. It seems that the fragrant religion values this jade mine very much. They set up this restriction when they were still cultivating the way of immortality. Looking at the sturdiness of the restriction, it seems that it is not weakened by the lack of vital qi. This jade mine is indeed full of vital qi. With that thought, Zhang Xiaohua came out from the ground and appeared in a small house. Looking around the ordinary house, Zhang Xiaohua released his divine sense again. After a long while he retracted it and frowned. This is going to be difficult. The house near the mountain is obviously the entrance to the mine. There are 5 guards in the house and the most annoying thing is that the door to the left of the house is a restriction. This restriction is the entrance to the mine? A disciple walked out from the restriction of the house. There was a slight fluctuation of vital qi. Then, the disciple took out a small triangular jade token and handed it to the guard beside him. He then cupped his hands and walked out of the house. The guard kept the jade token and placed it in the bag beside him. Then, his eyes brightened as he stared at the entrance that looked no different from an ordinary door. This is difficult. Although I have a concealment technique, it is unavoidable that my body will be exposed when I pass through the restriction. I will definitely be seen by these 5 people. It won't be difficult to subdue these 5 people. However, if more people come over, they will inevitably be discovered. Why don't we break this restriction? Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but have the idea of forcibly breaking the seal again. But at this time, the disciple who had just come out happened to walk past these houses. As he walked, he muttered, "Why am I so unlucky? Why was it always the smallest die every time? Motherfucker, just this night shift alone was already worth 10 days and he still had to continue today." He really didn't understand it was just a mining place, why was it so expensive? It's been like a day for decades. Oh no, it's been like a day for hundreds of years. There are people watching from the outside, but there are also people watching from the inside. Is there a need for that? Sai, is this Wang Laolu cheating? No, I have to get some information from him. Is there a trick to rolling dice? Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed when she heard this. Her body moved slightly as she rushed to the door. Just as she was about to leave, someone shouted, "Ing Laosi, do you still want to eat?" That person replied, Yes. Can't you see that I'm going over? You guys are going back to the mountain in a while, but the pitiful me still has to be on night shift." Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. She stopped and pondered for a moment before she sat down cross-legged. As expected, in just the time it took to finish a meal, Ing Laosi picked at the grass between his teeth and slowly walked over. There was no one else beside him. The corners of Zhang Xiaohua's mouth curled up into a smile. When Ing Laosi reached the door, he extended his finger and dragged him into the house before he could fall to the ground. Throughout the entire process, not a single sound was made. Not long after, Zhang Xiaohua transformed into Ing Laosi's face and put on his clothes. She slipped out of the house and followed Ing Laosi's route back to the house. I didn't expect it to be so troublesome to enter the jade mine at the foot of the 9 Radiance Peak. Not only is the jade token used to enter the house different every time, but there are also 5 guards who are constantly on guard duty. Every 2 hours there will be someone patrolling the place. If I didn't bump into Ing Laosi, it would be difficult for me to enter. Even if I managed to stop the 5 guards, I would still be discovered if I went in. With that thought in mind, Zhang Xiaohua arrived at the house. When the guards in the house saw someone enter, their faces turned cold. However, when they saw that the person who entered was Ing Laosi, they relaxed and revealed a mocking look in their eyes. One of the disciples laughed and said, "Ing Laosi, why are you on guard duty again? Could it be that you want to become the most outstanding disciple of our cleansing Jade Hall this year?" Zhang Xiaohua could easily disguise himself as Ing Laosi, but he could not change his voice completely. He was afraid that he would give himself away, so he circulated his jinqi, and his face immediately turned red. He gritted his teeth and opened his mouth, but no words came out. Why did Ing Laosi suddenly change his personality? Doesn't he grumble every time he goes in? Just as Zhang Xiaohua cursed in her heart, the person who took the jade token earlier scolded with a smile, "You little brats, why are you making fun of an honest person? Didn't I get ridiculed by you guys when I complained yesterday? After that, you said that he was talkative. Today he became a taciturn gourd without a mouth and you said that he was boring? You must be kind and honest." As he spoke, he took out another type of jade token and handed it to Zhang Xiaohua. He laughed and said, "Ing Laosi, if you don't have anything to do, don't play dice with your group of scoundrels. Can't you see that you lose every time? Although we are not betting on pills, the jade mine is very cold. If you keep on guard duty, be careful that your body won't be able to take it." Zhang Xiaohua took the jade token and pretended to be grateful. She cupped her hands and walked towards the small door. That person was stunned and scolded with a smile, "I said that for your own good. Why didn't you even say a word of thanks?" As he spoke, he stretched out his leg and kicked Zhang Xiaohua's buttocks. The strength of the kick was not small. Zhang Xiaohua staggered and rushed into the small door. Within her divine sense, the door fluctuated and the jade token in her hand glowed with a light that was invisible to the naked eye. Zhang Xiaohua went in. Behind her, she could still hear the laughter of everyone. Zhang Xiaohua let out a cold snort from his nose, but he looked up into the distance. Zhang Xiaohua was in a square hall. The surroundings were empty except for a few luminous pearls inlaid on the walls. In front of the hall was a deep and winding passageway. The passageway was very spacious and it could fit several horse carriages side by side. This was out of Zhang Xiaohua's expectations. Zhang Xiaohua released her divine sense. This passageway was indeed formed by a restriction and her divine sense could not penetrate it. Even the small door behind her was isolated from Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense. However, at this moment the passageway was quiet and there was no movement. It seemed that everyone had finished their work. Zhang Xiaohua did not hesitate. She released her divine sense and walked along the passageway. At first, the qi of heaven and earth in the passageway was not much different from the outside. Around the passageway there were very few jade stones. As Zhang Xiaohua went all the way down, the number of jade stones on the stone walls of the passageway gradually increased. The qi of heaven and earth gradually became denser. As Zhang Xiaohua went down, the passageway began to open up in all directions. There were many forks and caves. It was too much for the eyes to take in. However, Zhang Xiaohua ignored all of this and walked casually, looking for the passageway that led to the bottom. After a long time, Zhang Xiaohua gradually came to a place where the light was slightly dimmer. Although there were some luminous pearls in these places, they were extremely rare. There was only one every few feet. It seemed that the disciples of Shuyu Hall rarely came here. There were many jade stones on the stone walls and the quality was much better than the ones above. However, the dimmer the light was, the denser the qi of heaven and earth. Zhang Xiaohua walked all the way and used her divine sense to check the passageway. She wanted to find some clues from the restriction around the passageway. However, she could not find the place that the disciple mentioned. There are many forks in this passageway and there are many disciples of Shuyu Hall. Who knows where the place that the Tenryu sect spy mentioned is? It is impossible for me to find it by myself. Moreover, I did not get any information from Ing Laosi when I used the ecstasy finger just now. This means that the place that the Tenryu sect spy mentioned should be very secretive. Sai, why don't I capture that guy and ask him properly? Zhang Xiaohua thought regretfully and was ready to stop. After all, the jade stone vein was so huge that she was like a headless fly that couldn't find anything. However, at this moment, Zhang Xiaohua thought of the jade stone vein in the Yulong Grand Canyon. The qi of heaven and earth was extremely dense. It was just that her earth escape technique was not complete and her cultivation was limited. She was currently in the middle of the jade stone vein. This jade stone vein was definitely much bigger than the previous one. Moreover, the disciples of Shuyu Hall had already dug the passageway to the bottom. As she went down, there were more and more jade stones and the quality was getting better. Who knew what good things would be in the deepest part? Moreover, the chi of heaven and earth was even denser. She might even be able to find the place where the incense cult's immortal cultivation was passed down. There would definitely be better things in there. When she thought of the good things, Zhang Xiaohua's heart beat faster. She increased her speed and used the imperial wind technique to go to the deepest part of the jade stone vein like the wind. After walking for an unknown amount of time, Zhang Xiaohua finally arrived at the bottom of the jade mine, the end of the tunnel. There was only a luminous pearl embedded in the ceiling, and there was no other way to go down. Zhang Xiaohua stretched out her hand to touch the slightly sparkling and translucent jade stone. She extended her divine sense and felt that there were many more jade stones in the 500 feet below them. Moreover, the restriction of the passageway did not stop here. Could it be that there's something down there? Zhang Xiaohua rubbed her chin thoughtfully. After thinking for a moment, Zhang Xiaohua formed a hand seal and burrowed into the ground, heading towards the depths of the jade mine. Chapter 949. Zhang Xiaohua didn't give up. He used the earth escape technique to travel to the deepest part of the jade mine. He wanted to find the secret of the incense sect's immortal Tao. However, even after a long time, he still did not discover anything even after he had reached the depths of the ground. Moreover, as he went deeper and deeper into the ground, a powerful force that could not be resisted by human strength grew stronger and stronger, trying to squeeze him out of the ground. Maybe I'm wrong? Although the heaven-earth yuan qi below 9 radiance peak is abundant, it isn't the place for the incense sect to impart their immortal Tao. Since that's the case, I might as well find more jade. It would be even better if I could find the legendary jade essence. As Zhang Xiaohua thought about it, another idea popped up in his mind. He began to search around in the deepest part of his body. Just as he was searching, a powerful yuan qi fluctuation suddenly came from the front. It was detected by Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense that was sweeping around. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but reveal a look of joy. Such a powerful yuan qi fluctuation was most likely produced by an extremely powerful mystic tool. However, when he got closer, the scene in front of him left him flabbergasted. There was a colorful and gorgeous rainbow in front of him. It was like a rainbow coming out from the ground and going straight up. Zhang Xiaohua was even more surprised when he scanned the area with his divine sense. Each of the 5 colors was a piece of top-quality jade essence. It was sparkling and translucent. It was incomparably beautiful. However, when Zhang Xiaohua wanted to go forward and dig, he realized that the entire rainbow of jade essence was surrounded by a powerful restriction. This restriction was so strong that Zhang Xiaohua had never seen it before. When Zhang Xiaohua came back to his senses and took a closer look, he found that the entire ground beneath his feet was covered in such restrictive spells. It was as if the entire ground beneath the jade mine was covered, leaving only the chalcedony area leading to the outside world. Ah! Zhang Xiaohua was very happy. Needless to say, she really found the place. Underneath this restriction should be the place where the incense cult's immortal cultivation method was passed down. However, this restriction was extremely peculiar and its fluctuations were not very obvious. If Zhang Xiaohua had not seen the rainbow-like jade essence and deliberately probed it, she would not have been able to find it so easily with her divine sense. Even now, within his divine sense, the restriction was like the earth, seemingly endless, covering the entire area beneath his feet. Isn't this a little too much? Even the Sumeru world that Wan Wuxin and Senior Huan were in couldn't be compared to it. No wonder the incense sect was able to survive even after the immortal Tao was annihilated 10,000 years ago. Just this continuous restriction alone is not something the Misty School can compare to. Then, the Dalan Temple that is as famous as the cult of fragrance? And what kind of legacy did he rely on? In my impression, the Dalan Temple's elder Chang Gung seemed to be an ordinary Jianghu expert. Haha, at that time, I had just started practicing martial arts and did not even have the slightest inkling of the immortal Tao. How could I know if Elder Chang Gung was from the immortal Tao? Moreover, even now, with the nameless cultivation method, I can conceal my cultivation. Even someone as strong as Abbess Jingyi could not detect it. How could the dignified Dalan Temple not have such a method? Then, what about the Tenryu sect that is even more powerful than the cult of fragrance? Is their heavenly king also from the immortal Tao? Qin Shiyua's master seems to be called Garuda or something. Perhaps he is also from the immortal Tao? For a moment, Zhang Xiaohua thought of many things. But then, with a smile in his eyes, he muttered to himself, "What does this have to do with me? My Beidou school has not been established yet. When I have the opportunity to establish the cult of fragrance in the future, I will let Panning go and take a look." With that, Zhang Xiaohua released his divine sense and used the earth-burrowing technique to search above the restrictive spell for a long time. First, he wanted to see how the restrictive spell could be broken. Second, he wanted to find a secluded place. If he broke the restrictive spell and entered, he would not attract the attention of the disciples of the cult of fragrance. However, after the time it took to burn a stick of incense, Zhang Xiaohua could not figure out what the restrictive spell was. He only vaguely felt that there were some similarities between the restrictive spell and the rabbit talisman in his Naiwan palace. But when he looked at it carefully, he felt that there was a big difference. The jade slip that Elder Hua had left behind also had some similarities, but when he looked at it carefully, he found that there was a big difference. What should I do? Zhang Xiaohua touched his chin and hesitated. Previously, when he was at the core of the ruins of Huan, he had used the flow on his left arm and chasing dream to break the restrictive spell of the heavenly thunder. He already felt that the flow was showing signs of drying up. Perhaps it could not support this use. But if he did not use it, how could he be reserved when a treasure was right under his feet? After a long while, Zhang Xiaohua gritted his teeth and seemed to have made a decision. He scanned with his divine sense and found a place that was far away from the five-colored chalcedony. When he reached the edge of the restrictive spell, Zhang Xiaohua reached out his hand and took out Chasing Dream. He waved his left hand and Nameless pierced his sword. As expected, the mysterious flow flowed out from his left arm. However, it was obviously much weaker than before. Although this flow was very weak, when it poured into Zhu Meng was still able to easily cut a hole in the restriction beneath its feet. However, there were still restrictions at the bottom of the hole. It wasn't until Zhang Xiaohua had set up 18 layers of restrictions in one go that a strand of clear light emerged from the restrictions. After that, a strand of aura that was extremely weak yet extremely powerful and practically shook Zhang Xiaohua's mind directly emerged and caused Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense to tremble. What is this? Why does it feel so familiar? Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. The 18 layers of restrictive spells that he had just cut started to fuse together again. Zhang Xiaohua did not have time to think. He plunged his head into the restrictive spell. However, within the restrictive spell, before he could stand firm and see what was in front of him, the weak aura from before became overwhelming. It was a kind of submission from the bottom of his heart. It was an instinct from the bottom of his heart. It was a kind of worship from the bottom of his heart. It was a kind of worship from the bottom of his heart. It suppressed him tightly, forcing him to bend his knees, forcing him to go limp. I understand now. Zhang Xiaohua tried his best to hold on. Suddenly he thought of this feeling. When he was on the deserted island outside the sea and obtained the great wisdom sword, didn't he encounter a huge eye in the depths of the magma? Didn't he feel the same way at that time? However, the feeling now was even stronger than before. It almost made him unable to breathe. Zhang Xiaohua forced himself to form a seal. His body swayed as he floated in the air. Although he tried his best to release his divine sense, the oppressive feeling was not only pressuring him from the bottom of his heart. Even his divine sense was forced not to be released. Just as he was about to open his eyes and look at everything in the restrictive spell with his naked eyes, suddenly, after the oppressive aura, another divine sense, as huge as the will of the heavens, swept over. Divine sense? Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. The feeling when the divine sense swept into Zhang Xiaohua's Naiwan palace was similar to the feeling when Zhang Xiaohua encountered the huge eye previously. Last time the divine sense was as heavy as a rock. However, it was not released and seemed to be in a deep sleep. However, this time the divine sense was flexible. It was just that. Zhang Xiaohua also faintly felt that it was extremely tired, extremely old, extremely obscure and extremely empty. Although this divine sense was like that of an old man, it was also like the will of the heavens that could not be defied. When the divine sense swept over Zhang Xiaohua's body, Zhang Xiaohua felt as if he was naked. What nameless mantra? What concealment mantra? What concealment mantra? They were all useless. Of course, when the divine sense swept into Zhang Xiaohua's Naiwan palace, Zhang Xiaohua did not have any resistance at all and allowed it to enter directly. Suddenly, when the divine sense touched the layer of golden divine restriction outside the elixir core, the divine restriction emitted a layer of bright light and bounced off the divine sense. Immediately, two talismans emitted the same color and flashed out from the divine restriction. They were the two talismans, one dragon and one tiger. Once the two dragon and tiger talismans appeared, it was as if they were alive. One curled up like a dragon soaring to the ninth heaven, and the other opened its claws like a howling mountain. In an instant, the roar of the dragon and the roar of the tiger resounded. From Zhang Xiaohua's Naiwan palace, a kind of chi power was produced. It was a kind of chi power that resisted the invading divine sense. Although the chi power of the dragon and tiger talismans was small, it was extremely pure and vigorous. Combined with Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense, it actually formed a sharp contrast with the matchless divine sense. For a moment, the divine sense was different from Zhang Xiaohua's imagination. It did not entangle with Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense and spread out again. This doesn't seem to be divine sense. With the support of the dragon and tiger talismans, Zhang Xiaohua could faintly resist the overwhelming and suffocating chi power. She could actually stand up straight. Although she still could not release her divine sense, there was no longer that oppressive feeling like before. She could even open her eyes. However, when Zhang Xiaohua opened his eyes, the scene before him was something he would never forget for the rest of his life. Even the things he had seen in the restriction at the core of the ruins of Huan could not compare to what was before him. In front of Zhang Xiaohua was a vast and boundless space. She could not see the end of it with her naked eyes. Far away in front of Zhang Xiaohua, there was a green gourd suspended in mid-air. The shape of the gourd looked familiar. It was exactly the same as the gourd on the sleeves of the disciples of the pill department in the pill expanding hall. However, this was not the most unforgettable thing for Zhang Xiaohua. Just below the green gourd, she could vaguely see the outline of a huge dragon head. Behind the dragon head, the faint outline of a pale yellow dragon body extended endlessly into the distance. In Zhang Xiaohua's eyes, there was no end to it. Dragon vein. When Zhang Xiaohua saw everything in front of her, she almost fell from midair. After thinking for a long time, such a word popped up in her mind. And this word seemed to be something she had seen in a jade slip, or in a biography, or in a legend in the countryside. Chapter 950. When Zhang Xiaohua saw the vague outline of the dragon's head, he couldn't help but be shocked. When he calmed himself down, he looked at his surroundings curiously. It was obvious that above his head was a vast expanse of light blue, just like the clear blue sky outside. Below his feet, there was a faint golden outline of water ripples. This outline wasn't as clear as the dragon's head in the distance, but upon closer inspection he could tell that it was the body of the dragon vein. How long is this dragon vein? Could it be that it spirals within the restriction? Zhang Xiaohua frowned. At this moment, the aura from the dragon and tiger talisman in Zhang Xiaohua's Naiwan palace was able to withstand the aura from the dragon vein. However, his divine sense couldn't leave his body, so he was no different from an ordinary person. Of course, the dragon vein was incomparably huge. Even if Zhang Xiaohua could release his divine sense, it could only cover a range of 400 to 500 feet. Compared to the dragon vein, it was just a drop in the ocean. How could he see the entire dragon vein? Just as he was thinking about it, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. He thought to himself, this is bad. When I entered, it was already night. I have been outside the restriction for a long time. Could it be midnight now? At this moment, a strange fluctuation appeared on Zhang Xiaohua's body. Before Zhang Xiaohua could react, he immediately fell from the sky and fell straight into the vague outline of the dragon vein. The strange thing was that when Zhang Xiaohua's body fell, the fluctuation became more intense. Boundless stellar energy shot out and wrapped around Zhang Xiaohua. At this moment he was at the edge of the dragon vein's spine. The dragon vein seemed to be resisting and wanted to prevent anything from entering. However, the starlight was just a ripple that passed through the spine without any obstruction. Zhang Xiaohua fell into the dragon vein. After entering the dragon vein, it was different from the outside. Although it was also empty, there was a slightly viscous thing that was similar to the chi of heaven and earth and starlight flowing in the dragon vein. It seemed to be the essence of the dragon vein. Right in the center of the enormous essence of the dragon vein, something that was countless times thinner than a strand of hair was fluttering slightly, like a strand of hair brushing against one's face in the wind. Coincidentally, when Zhang Xiaohua's body fell beside the strand of hair, he floated in the air and didn't move anymore. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to be meditating as usual. He was sitting cross-legged. The mysterious fluctuation in his 5 centers facing heaven body continued to surge, drawing in the starlight from the sky. In his meridians, the Carefree Heart Sutra was also activated, slowly absorbing the starlight and the heaven-earth yuan qi within the restriction into his meridians. At the beginning, everything was the same as before. However, after a while, the suction force on Zhang Xiaohua's body gradually increased. The pores all over his body opened up like a bottomless pit, swallowing the little heaven-earth yuan qi in the dragon vein, as well as the things that were similar to heaven-earth yuan qi. Therefore, the thing that was thinner than a strand of hair started to sway even more vigorously under the suction force. When it started to sway even more, an extremely weak and almost inaudible fluctuation came from far away. When it came into contact with the fluctuation on Zhang Xiaohua's body, it immediately approached intimately as if it had seen sweet dew. The starlight from the sky was being refined in Zhang Xiaohua's meridians. An extremely small portion was used in the meridians, an extremely small portion was integrated into the vital energy, and the rest was gathered in a mysterious place behind Zhang Xiaohua's head. The weak fluctuation also followed the trajectory of the starlight after it was refined and entered that mysterious place. The moment the fluctuation entered, it immediately shook violently, as if a person in despair had found a way out. An unparalleled joy came from far away, and then a dragon's roar resounded through the restriction. Tremor. A huge tremor. When the dragon's roar sounded, the entire dragon vein shook violently, and the entire restriction also moved up and down with this tremor. Then, the thing that was thinner than a strand of hair started to sway again. This time it was different from before. If the previous sway was like a seaweed, then the current sway was like the tail of a fish. To be more precise, it was the sway of a dragon. As the thin strand of hair moved slightly, the entire dragon vein swam. Far away, under the green gourd, the huge outline of the dragon's head was slowly moving towards Zhang Xiaohua. Inside the outline of the dragon's head, where the thin strand of hair was, there was a dragon head that was invisible to the naked eye. It opened its eyes and used two extremely thin golden dragon claws under its abdomen to move forward with difficulty. Above the dragon's head, there were a few formations that covered the dragon's head. In the middle, there was a strong suction force that continuously sucked the heaven and earth yuan qi in the dragon vein into the formations. The formations then sent the heaven and earth yuan qi into the green gourd above the dragon's head. The gourd was upside down, and the mouth of the gourd sucked the heaven and earth yuan qi in. On top of the gourd there was another strange formation. On top of the formation there was a layer of restriction. On top of that, there was the strange five-colored chalcedony that Zhang Xiaohua saw outside the restriction. At this moment, the formation was absorbing the heaven and earth yuan qi in the dragon vein, but at the same time, it also restricted the movement of the dragon's head in the dragon vein. Although the dragon's head was slightly tilted, and the dragon's claws were also exerting force, there was only a rumbling sound and it couldn't move much. Seeing that no matter how hard it tried, it couldn't get close to Zhang Xiaohua, the dragon that couldn't be seen by the naked eye became anxious. The huge dragon's head also revealed its anxiety. A dragon's roar resounded through the restriction, but there was no one else in the restriction other than Zhang Xiaohua, so who could hear it? Another 10 minutes passed, but there was no change in the situation. The seal under the green gourd was suppressing the huge and empty dragon vein. The remaining dragon soul in the dragon vein was also gradually stabilizing. However, at this moment the situation took a turn for the better. The tiny dragon soul that was close to Zhang Xiaohua's body gradually swayed left and right with the circulation of Zhang Xiaohua's carefree heart sutra. It slowly approached Zhang Xiaohua's body, and when the dragon's head felt the attractive force, its tiny eyes opened in surprise. As a result, the dragon soul beside Zhang Xiaohua swayed unconsciously, and it consciously moved closer. Not long after, it was also sucked to the side of Zhang Xiaohua's pores, following the trajectory of the yuan qi and the heterogeneous yuan qi in the dragon vein. However, regardless of whether it was the yuan qi of heaven and earth or the heterogeneous yuan qi in the dragon vein, they were all extremely minute. They were exactly what Zhang Xiaohua's pores could absorb. The essence of the dragon vein was different. It was a material object and not something that the Carefree Heart Sutra could absorb. However, Zhang Xiaohua didn't intend to absorb it, but the dragon soul was intentionally being absorbed. As the dragon soul's intentional actions and Zhang Xiaohua's unintentional absorption of the yuan qi, more and more dragon soul gathered around Zhang Xiaohua's body. In contrast, the empty dragon vein that only had an outer appearance became more and more stuck together. This situation only gradually stopped when a huge butterfly-like dragon tail appeared. However, although the slender dragon soul could be ignored, the huge outline of the dragon vein couldn't be ignored. The dragon tail and the dragon's body that connected to Zhang Xiaohua's body formed an airtight encirclement. Although the starlight that filled the sky was able to reach Zhang Xiaohua's surroundings, the pure dragon soul and the outline of the dragon vein blocked all the pores on his body. For a moment, the amount of starlight that was absorbed into his body was greatly reduced. Not long after, the undulations on Zhang Xiaohua's body changed again. Suddenly, at the core of the Carefree Heart Sutra's meridians, which was the middle Dantian's Shanzhong acupoint, a faint golden brilliance flashed. This brilliance formed a circular arc that expanded outwards and enveloped the slender dragon soul. Immediately, a powerful suction force was born from the halo and sucked the dragon tail in. What was even more unbelievable was that the enormous outline of the dragon vein, which was many times larger than Zhang Xiaohua's body, was also sucked into Zhang Xiaohua's Shanzhong acupoint along with the dragon tail. Feeling that its tail was being sucked in, the dragon head that was extremely far away was not shocked but happy. It didn't put up any resistance and allowed itself to be sucked in. Therefore, on this night, other than refining the starlight and absorbing the yuan qi of heaven and earth, Zhang Xiaohua's Shanzhong acupoint on his chest also had the strange phenomenon of absorbing the dragon vein and dragon soul. It was unknown how much time had passed, but the dragon vein seemed to be endless. There was no sign of it ending. The dragon head, which was initially extremely shocked, gradually revealed an expression of impatience. The dragon head moved slightly as if it wanted to break free. The dragon soul paused slightly, and the faint golden halo immediately produced a suction force that was stronger than before, preventing the dragon soul from breaking free. When the dragon soul saw this, it seemed to have learned the trick and charged forward with all its might. Just as the dragon soul expected, as the dragon soul struggled to break free, the suction force from the Shanzhong acupoint increased several times and the speed at which the dragon soul was being sucked in also increased. After a long time, the starlight on Zhang Xiaohua's body began to dim and the suction force also decreased slightly. The dragon soul panicked and seemed to know that the starlight was about to dissipate. It unconsciously opened its small dragon mouth and the dragon mouth on the outline of the dragon vein widened. With a dragon roar, it threw itself at the array above its head. The suction force of the array increased greatly, but as the dragon vein approached, it produced a repulsive force that seemed to maintain a balance. However, the situation at the Shanzhong acupoint was the opposite. As the dragon soul struggled, it first relaxed slightly and then a mysterious fluctuation shook. Zhang Xiaohua's entire body emitted a faint golden brilliance and the Shanzhong acupoint immediately produced a strong suction force. This force was coincidental and acted on the dragon soul when the array produced a repulsive force. With a loud swoosh, the entire seal shook. Following which, the seal was emptied and the dragon soul was sucked into Zhang Xiaohua's Shanzhong acupoint. Chapter 951. In order to maintain the balance, the formation above the dragon vein produced a repulsive force towards the dragon's soul. Who would have thought that the dragon's soul would be sucked into Zhang Xiaohua's Shanzhong acupoint and be sucked into her meridians in a flash? At the same time, the formation instantly produced another suction force, wanting to continue binding the dragon vein under the formation. However, at this moment, the dragon vein and dragon soul had already entered Zhang Xiaohua's Shanzhong acupoint. The restriction was empty and there was no trace of the dragon vein left. As a result, the entire array formation stopped moving. As for the dragon soul had succeeded in its trick and was sucked into Zhang Xiaohua's Shanzhong acupoint as it wished. However, the dragon soul took too long to be absorbed. At the same time that Zhang Xiaohua was absorbing the dragon's soul, she was also absorbing the starlight. The vital energy in her meridians also flowed along with the Carefree Heart Sutra. The tail of the dragon vein and dragon's soul entered the Shanzhong acupoint and did not gather in the middle dantian. Instead, they flowed along with the vital energy and entered all the meridians in Zhang Xiaohua's body. It was not a big deal that the dragon vein and dragon's soul entered her meridians. If the dragon's head entered the middle dantian, firstly, the middle dantian was the center of vital energy and formed a separate space. Even if the dragon's soul was as large as the dragon's soul, it could still be stored. Secondly, the dragon's soul was an item of vital energy and was the best at changing. Previously, it was suppressed by the formation within the restriction and could not change at will. Now that it had entered the middle dantian, it only needed to shrink and it could be completely stored. Unfortunately, the Carefree Heart Sutra that Zhang Xiaohua cultivated at night was precisely to refine the endless starlight from beyond the heavens. The things refined by starlight were the most vital. When the dragon vein entered Zhang Xiaohua's meridians, it stuck the dragon vein and Zhang Xiaohua's meridians together. In this night, the refined starlight played a major role and stuck the dragon vein to all of Zhang Xiaohua's meridians. When the dragon's soul entered Zhang Xiaohua's Shanzhong acupuncture point, the dragon's soul knew that the situation was not good. When the dragon's soul shrank, it could not do as it pleased. Instead, the dragon's soul seemed to have become one with Zhang Xiaohua's meridians. For a moment, the dragon's soul was shocked. It had just escaped the wolf's den and entered the tiger's den. In a moment of panic, it did not care about anything else. The dragon's soul was already extremely weak and had long been on the verge of death. If it had not seen the majestic vitality behind Zhang Xiaohua's head, how could it have allowed this mortal to absorb it? Now that it had fallen into such a state, it could not be calculative about gains and losses. The dragon's soul let out a dragon's roar and its body shrank rapidly. In just a moment, it had shrunk from an unimaginable length to a 3-inch small dragon. At this moment, the small dragon looked even more dispirited. However, at this moment, Zhang Xiaohua's meridians were still operating the Carefree Heart Sutra. An endless stream of starlight and the yuan qi of heaven and earth were being refined into her Shanzhong acupuncture point and then into her meridians. The small dragon looked like it could not stand steadily. Then, the small dragon stretched out its body and rushed into her meridians. It followed the refined starlight and headed straight for the mysterious place behind Zhang Xiaohua's head. In another moment, the mysterious undulations around Zhang Xiaohua's body stopped abruptly. The projected starlight also dissipated abruptly. Everything disappeared without a trace. However, within the boundless restriction, there was no trace of the enormous and weak dragon's vein. A faint dragon's head appeared in Zhang Xiaohua's Shanzhong acupuncture point. At this moment, her entire meridians had been occupied by the dragon's vein. Or rather, because of the refined starlight, the dragon's vein had faintly fused with her meridians. In the future they would definitely fuse together. When the starlight dissipated, Zhang Xiaohua opened her eyes. A sharp light flashed in her eyes. It was the invisible majesty after absorbing the dragon's soul and dragon's vein. What's going on? When she saw that there was nothing in front of her, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but feel surprised. Furthermore, it was obvious that the majesty that made her unable to breathe yesterday had disappeared. The green gourd in the distance was still there and she could release her divine sense as usual. However, Zhang Xiaohua felt that her divine sense was different from before. However, if she wanted to point out the difference, she could not pinpoint it. The range of 400 to 500 feet did not expand, but the things that she could sense with her divine sense were different. It was as if Zhang Xiaohua could sense the remnant aura left behind by the dragon's vein yesterday. Where could such an enormous dragon's vein go? Zhang Xiaohua bit her lips and was a little depressed. Could it be like the earth's core and hide in the void? However, when she looked at the green gourd, Zhang Xiaohua felt that something was wrong. However, since the dragon's vein was gone, Zhang Xiaohua's movements were more free. When he flew to the bottom of the gourd, his divine sense saw that there were several formations below the mouth of the gourd. He could not help but feel even more surprised. What kind of formation is this? In the empty air there were 5 weak fluctuations of vital energy. However, these fluctuations did not have a source and seemed to have appeared out of thin air. The fluctuations of vital energy in each place were different, but when the fluctuations of these 5 places were put together, they formed a new formation. Seeing the magic of this formation, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but be curious. He flew forward and observed carefully. This formation had disappeared just now and was also in a static state. Zhang Xiaohua was not afraid of anything. After observing for a long time, Zhang Xiaohua was still puzzled. He could not find the source of the vital energy of heaven and earth. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and his face was filled with disbelief. He reached out his hand and took out a jade box from his chest. He struck a few incantations on the jade box and opened the jade box. What greeted his eyes was a blue pearl. It was the water element pearl that Zhang Xiaohua obtained from the ruins of Nirvana Heavenly Evolution 5 Elements formation. Taking out the water element pearl, Zhang Xiaohua scanned it with his divine sense. At this moment, what Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense saw was different from before. He felt the uniqueness of the water vital energy in the water. Then he looked at the 5 formations that were emitting different fluctuations in the air. He flew straight to one place and scanned with his divine sense. He compared the vital energy fluctuations of the water element pearl with those of the 5 formations. After that, he took out the other 5 elements beads and compared them with the energy waves of the 5 formations. Standing in the air, he stroked his chin thoughtfully. As expected, the energy waves emitted by this formless formation are the same as the water element beads. It should be of the water element. The energy waves emitted by the other formations are also responding to the other 5 elements beads. Needless to say, this is also a 5 elements formation, but what is this 5 elements formation for? After pondering for a while, Zhang Xiaohua looked at the original location of the dragon vein, then at the top of the green gourd. Suddenly, an unimaginable thought appeared in his mind and he was overjoyed. Zhang Xiaohua immediately made a gesture and flew towards the top of the green gourd. After a long while, Zhang Xiaohua returned with a face full of joy. That's right, there is still a formation above the green gourd. At the bottom of the green gourd, there is a faint trace of pure vital energy of the universe being sent into the formation. If I am not wrong, the vital energy of the universe is being sent out to replenish the seal, allowing it to be as strong as ever. Where does the pure vital energy of the universe in the green gourd come from? Isn't it coming from the invisible 5 elements formation? And where does the vital energy of the universe in the 5 elements formation come from? Isn't it the dragon vein that I saw yesterday? If the vital energy of the universe had not been absorbed by the 5 elements formation for so many years, how could the dragon vein be barely visible? Impressive, impressive. The seniors of the aroma sect are truly impressive. Just for this layer of restrictive spells, they were able to suppress a dragon's vein and use the essence of the dragon's vein to transform into the chi of heaven and earth to support this restrictive spell. But this restrictive spell only contains the dragon's vein. What's the point of maintaining it? Before Zhang Xiaohua could figure out the problem, another thought lit up Zhang Xiaohua's mind. This invisible formation can actually gather the vital energy of the dragon vein. Could it be the spirit gathering formation that was mentioned in Elder Hua's Jade Scroll? Is it the formation that was used to gather the vital energy of the universe together during the heyday of the immortal Tao so that the cultivators could absorb the vital energy of the universe many times more than usual? At that thought, Zhang Xiaohua's heart burned with passion. Indeed, heaven and earth yuan qi was scarce at the moment. If there was a spirit gathering array that could gather the already scarce heaven and earth yuan qi, not to mention a breakthrough in cultivation, even if there was enough heaven and earth yuan qi to allow people to sense it and set foot on the path to immortality, that would be a great merit. However, she could not find the source of the vital energy of the universe. It seemed to be hidden in the void, which made Zhang Xiaohua scratch her head. What can I do? Zhang Xiaohua stared at the void in front of her and scanned it with her divine sense. She frowned. After scanning the area with his spiritual consciousness for a long time, Zhang Xiaohua unknowingly discovered some clues. He was currently standing beside the water element array and holding the water element pearl in his hand. The yuan qi fluctuation in the air seemed to be resonating with the water element pearl. Whoever started the trouble should end it. It seems like the water elemental pearl is the only way to find out the secret of the water-type formation. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the water elemental pearl in her hand and sighed. If only the delusion breaker Dharma I could open and see through the void, I wouldn't have to spend so much effort. Brain power. As she thought about it, Zhang Xiaohua tried to inject her vital energy into the water elemental pearl. She was right. She did not know how to use the water elemental pearl. The only thing she knew was to inject her vital energy into it. It was really boring. Of course, a blunt method was undeniably a method. As Zhang Xiaohua injected her vital energy, the water elemental pearl gradually emitted a faint blue brilliance. This brilliance was very weak, but it was able to cause a change in the energy waves. As the energy waves of the water elemental pearl changed, the dozens of energy waves in the formation hidden in the void also changed slightly. Zhang Xiaohua was elated. She scanned the area with her divine sense and memorized the positions of the dozens of energy waves clearly. Using the same method, Zhang Xiaohua also memorized the positions of the other 4 energy waves. Zhang Xiaohua did not know what was in the void. He only knew that as long as he changed the dozens of energy waves into vital stones of various attributes, he should be able to imitate the 5 elemental spirit convergence formation. Chapter 952. Zhang Xiaohua used the most clumsy method to understand the 5 elemental spirit gathering array. He memorized it in his mind and kept all the 5 elemental beads. Then he flew to the side of the green gourd. The green gourd was not big. It was smaller than an ordinary gourd. The surface of the gourd was suffused with a green glow. As far as the eye could see, there was a layer of light flowing across the surface of the gourd. Within the light, there were many talismans that looked like tadpoles appearing and disappearing. When Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense swept across the area, the gourd was different from what he could see with his naked eyes. There was only a slight fluctuation of energy that was different from an ordinary weapon. There was nothing special about it. Zhang Xiaohua was even more delighted when he saw this. He had quite a number of magic tools in his possession now, and he had gradually come to know that the more inconspicuous the energy fluctuation was, the more formidable the magic tool was. Not to mention others, just the bracelet on his left arm did not have the slightest energy fluctuation. As he thought about it, Zhang Xiaohua stretched out his hand to grab the green gourd. When Zhang Xiaohua's hand touched the green gourd, a jade green light flashed and blocked his hand. He could not get any closer. Sigh. Zhang Xiaohua sighed. However, there was no trace of disappointment on his face. He knew that this would be the result. It would be strange if such an important item did not have any powerful restrictions. Besides that, Zhang Xiaohua was clearly aware that this restriction was definitely not something he could break through right now. If he wanted to forcefully break through the restriction, he could only use the nameless flow on his left arm. However, he was currently within the restriction and had to rely on this flow to escape, so how could he waste it here? He looked at the green gourd with some reluctance, then leaped towards the seal above his head. When he took out the chasing dream, a weak stream of energy flowed into it. It only broke the first 3 layers of the seal, but the 4th layer blocked the chasing dream. Not good. Zhang Xiaohua's face changed. Needless to say, the mysterious energy was already depleted. It was not enough to break the remaining 15 layers of the restriction. What should we do now? Zhang Xiaohua stopped. Chasing Dream was stuck in the restriction and didn't dare to move anymore. Zhang Xiaohua had never known the origin of the mysterious flow on her left arm. She only knew that it would appear when she performed the nameless swordsmanship and was always successful in breaking inhibition. This was something that Zhang Xiaohua relied on. Unfortunately, this flow was not cultivated by herself. It came and went inexplicably. Now that she was trapped in the inhibition, she could only rely on this flow to get out. Seeing that the flow was about to dry up, she couldn't help but feel anxious. Zhang Xiaohua furrowed her brows as she looked at the restriction above her head. She watched as the restriction she had just broken started to close up. She subconsciously turned her gaze towards the green gourd. After pondering for a moment, Zhang Xiaohua gritted her teeth and pulled Chasing Dream out of the restriction. She returned to the front of the gourd and used her divine sense to inspect it. Then she waved her sword and stabbed at the gourd. Shwa. Like a small stone being thrown into a pond, a ripple appeared on the surface of the gourd. Following that, a black crack appeared on the surface of the gourd. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua's face changed drastically. The mysterious flow had already been cut off. What remained was flowing towards Chasing Dream. Zhang Xiaohua formed a seal and immediately circled around the gourd. The tip of Chasing Dream's sword also circled the gourd and drew a thin black line on it. After doing all this, the flow on Zhang Xiaohua's left arm had already dried up. There was only a small amount left in Chasing Dream. She sighed. Zhang Xiaohua kept Chasing Dream in her arms and watched the changes in the gourd. The black line that was drawn by Chasing Dream first expanded and then shrunk. It was as though it was about to heal. Zhang Xiaohua's heart sank as she watched. However, when the black line shrank to a certain size, it could not shrink any further. After a while, it suddenly expanded, and this expansion could not be stopped. It was like a piece of burning oil paper. With a hua sound, the entire space beside the gourd was set ablaze. After a flash of brilliance, it revealed the same green gourd as before. Zhang Xiaohua's expression alternated between joy and worry. When the situation stabilized, she tried to stretch her hand out again. As expected, when her hand touched the gourd, she didn't see any restriction. The waist of the gourd was very slender. She could only hold it with one hand. It was delicate to the touch and actually felt a little warm. Zhang Xiaohua tried to use some strength to grab it. The gourd didn't move at all. She then used more strength, but the gourd still didn't move. This wasn't out of Zhang Xiaohua's expectations. She saw that his expression didn't change. She used all her strength to lift the gourd shook twice. It was as though it weighed over 10,000 caddies. This time, Zhang Xiaohua's eyes revealed a serious expression. He didn't expect this small gourd to be so heavy. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua stretched out both hands and grabbed the middle of the gourd. She shouted, "Rise?" Ever since Zhang Xiaohua tempered his bones, his strength had been constantly increasing. At this moment, even he didn't know how much strength he had in his arms. But even with this strength, he could only barely move the gourd from its original position. It was only moved slightly more than a foot. Zhang Xiaohua was somewhat miserable. Such a heavy gourd. Even the great wisdom heavy sword can't compare to it. How can I carry it? Just as she was thinking, the gourd in her divine sense emitted a trace of cryptic fluctuation. Zhang Xiaohua's eyebrows jumped. She locked her divine sense on the gourd and tried to put it into her purse. Again it was out of Zhang Xiaohua's expectations. That heavy gourd actually disappeared without a trace. Zhang Xiaohua beamed with joy. The immortal Dao's methods are indeed powerful. To actually be able to put such a heavy object into a purse, it's really too wonderful. Alright. Why can't I put my great wisdom heavy sword into it? However, right at this moment, before Zhang Xiaohua could think any further, she suddenly heard a kacha sound above her head. It was as if something had broken. When Zhang Xiaohua raised her head, she saw that the light green seal was now brittle. The cracks were like the clear sky spreading out into the distance. Following which, with a hua sound, the entire seal was destroyed. Following which, with a hu sound, a powerful wave of air came crashing down from above. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua finally understood how powerful it was. She exclaimed in shock, "Don't tell me this mountain is going to collapse?" Indeed, with a sound from above, an endless amount of rocks, mud, and jade came crashing down from above. "I owe my jade essence." In her panic, Zhang Xiaohua did not forget her purpose in coming to the jade essence mine. While shouting, she made a hand seal and directly rushed towards the swaying five-colored jade essence. The endless amount of rocks came crashing down, filling up the original location of the dragon vein. Although Zhang Xiaohua was not afraid of the earth escape, there was a kind of downward pressure and a kind of upward pressure that made him feel quite uncomfortable. He forced himself to use the earth escape and even the crimson spirit shield to protect his body. What made Zhang Xiaohua happy was that his efforts were not in vain. The five-colored jade essence just happened to slip past her. Wherever her divine sense passed, it filled up the empty belt. At this time, far away in Lingxiang Peak's Mo Shen Palace, in a jade coffin, Nun Jinggang's body was lying quietly. Around her, Nun Jingyi, Nun Jingfan, Nun Shuizhen, and some elders of the incense cult all looked solemn and sorrowful. Peacock, Qin, and Yuyan stood a little further away. Their eyes were filled with horror and they kept silent. Elders, Senior Sister's body was found by the patrolling disciples in a secluded place in Jinghai Lake several days ago. Nun Jingyi's face was gloomy. She opened her mouth and looked at the elders. She said, "Senior Sister's fatal wound was a sword on her throat. It was from the back to the front and it was fatal." Everyone was shocked. Nun Jingfan frowned and said, "Sect leader, this matter is a little strange." "What do you mean?" Nun Jingyi felt a little heartache when she saw Nun Jinggang die with her eyes wide open. "First Elder. Wasn't she always in seclusion in Ruijin Palace? I didn't see her go down the mountain. Why did she go to Jinghai Lake? Moreover, sect leader should know better than us about First Elder's martial arts. Let's not talk about martial arts first. She received the inheritance back then and had already stepped into the path of immortality. Even in the entire Jianghu, how many people are First Elder's match? Also, First Elder's wound is also strange. Why was it stabbed from the back? Could it be that someone close to First Elder suddenly did it?" Nun Shuizhen suddenly asked, "What about First Elder's disciple? Has Yu Zhuochuan been found?" "Reporting to Master, there's no news yet." Yuyan continued from behind. "Also, First Elder's first disciple, Shi Mujuan, left the mountain to train a month ago. There's also no news. I've already sent the disciples of Ruijin Palace to search for him. Someone close to her." "This," an elder said in a low voice. "No," Nun Jingyi heard and shook her head. "This matter shouldn't have anything to do with Shi Mujuan." Then she pointed at the sword on Nun Jinggang's throat and said, "Although First Senior Sister's fatal sword wound is a sword wound, it's different from an ordinary sword wound. If I'm not wrong, it should be a flying sword from the path of immortality." "Path of immortality? Flying sword?" Everyone was even more surprised. When the disciples patrolling the mountain found First Senior Sister's remains, there was only a long sword beside her. Even in her torn clothes, there were only a few jade talismans. As for the other, defensive Dharma weapons, they were all gone. I first looked at the place where First Senior Sister usually cultivated. The few Dharma weapons she used were all there. I don't know what kind of Dharma weapons she took down the mountain. However, these Dharma weapons were not found by the disciples patrolling the mountain. They were probably taken away by the person who killed First Senior Sister. Could it be that person from Huansu? Nun Shuizhen guessed. No, that senior from Huansu has a high cultivation and saved Xia Qing and the rest. He has a relationship with our fragrant sect. He wouldn't attack First Senior Sister for no reason. Then it can only be a spy who sneaked in. Chapter 953. Hearing Nun Shuezhen's guess, all the elders frowned. Spies had existed in the incense cult for a long time, and they all knew about it. However, these spies were weak in martial arts and couldn't cause any big waves, so the incense cult didn't do much. What's more, the fragrant cult also had spies in other sections. This was an open secret. If the fragrant cult wiped out all the spies in the other sects, the spies in the other sects would definitely meet the same fate. Thus, the other sects were well aware of this and turned a blind eye. They did not expose this matter. Previously, Jingyi Shirtai felt that some of the spies were causing a ruckus, so she only sent Zhang Xiaohua, the newly minted guardian disciple, to investigate. Didn't this prove this point? As if Nun Shuezhen had seen through her thoughts, Nun Jingyi's face sank. She said, "This is also my guess." Then she looked out of the window and said leisurely, "But the spies of the other sects are basically under the control of my Moneng sect disciples, and they don't have such strength. Could it be the Tenryu sect? Or could it be a pawn that the mysterious power had placed in the incense cult long ago?" Nun Jingfan also nodded. "Sect leader, you're right. Only these two sects have the strength to send people from the Xiantian Dao to spy in the incense cult." But then Nun Jingyi smiled bitterly. "The problem is, why did the Tenryu sect do this to the Great Elder? Could it be that the Great Elder saw through some big secret?" Nun Shuezhen exclaimed, "Sect leader, you're right. Aren't the Jinghai Lake and Yanqi Lake the entrance to the incense cult sect protecting formation? The Tenryu sect must have done something there, and the Great Elder Jing Gang found out, so the spies of the Tenryu sect killed them." Nun Jingyi nodded slightly. At this time, Qin Qin suddenly asked, "But I don't understand. Master Jing Gang, why did she go to the Jinghai Lake? Didn't she say that she was in closed-door cultivation?" As soon as she said that, Peacock glared at her from the side. Qin Qin was confused and looked at Nun Jingfan suspiciously. Nun Jingyi remained silent. After a long while she asked, "Where is Rin Xiaoyao now?" "Sect leader Bing, this Rin Xiaoyao is quite diligent. First he went to White Mountain Peak, then Wild Goose Peak. Out of the 19 spreading fragrance peaks he went to 4 of them. When Grand Elder Jing Gang was found, he was at Kuanglu Peak, which was 3 days' journey from Kam Si Lake. Now, I don't know where he went, but he should be on the way to Shiling Peak. This fellow is rather clever. I guess he's rather lucky. After this, if Shi Mujuan doesn't find trouble with him, I won't have anything to worry about. So I thought that eldest senior sister." At this point, Nun Jingyi stopped talking. She turned around and walked to her seat. She raised her head and asked, "Last night, what happened to the earthquake? Is there any news from the foot of the mountain?" Nun Shuezhen took a step forward and reported, "I sent my disciples down the mountain last night and they haven't returned yet. I don't know the reason. Grand Elder Jing Gang has fallen and Shi Mujuan is temporarily not at Lingxiang Peak. Ruijin Hall has been without a deputy hall master, so it's inconvenient to have no one to manage it. Peacock, your disciple is here." Peacock immediately stepped forward. "You'll temporarily be the hall master of Ruijin Hall. Qin Qin and Yu Yan will assist you. First, familiarize yourself with the daily affairs." This. Peacock was shocked. "Ruijin Hall is the first hall of our Lingxiang Peak. Your disciple's talent is shallow. I'm afraid I'll disappoint you, sect leader Bing. It's better to let Master Bing be in charge while we assist her." Nun Jingyi waved her hand. "There's no need. You're an inherited disciple and your status is fixed. If you don't experience the storm, how can you see the rainbow? If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask your master. If you have any difficulties, you can also ask me." Peacock hesitated for a moment. Looking at Qin Qin and Yu Yan's eager eyes, she could only bow. "Thank you, sect leader Bing. All right, junior sister Shuezhen. Send people to investigate the whereabouts of the spies that we already know. Find out who." Just as Nun Jingyi said this, the entire Lingxiang Peak shook violently. Jade tiles and dust fell from the roof. Everyone lost their footing and almost fell down. Everyone was shocked and immediately used their qinggong to leap into the air. Only Nun Jingyi's expression did not change. Her body floated up slightly and floated in the air. When the shaking stopped, everyone calmed down. Nun Jingyi released her divine sense to see what was happening outside. However, when her divine sense reached out for about 200 feet, her expression changed drastically. She shouted sternly, "Junior sister Shuezhen, hurry!" Before she could finish speaking, a series of loud rumbling noises rang out. The entire mountain peak shook violently again, and this time, it was several times stronger than before. "Let's go!" Nun Jingyi shouted, and her figure dashed out of Immerse Palace. The people behind her didn't dare to delay, and all of them leaped out. When everyone arrived outside Immerse Palace, they saw that the entire peak was shaking left and right. It even sank a little. Everyone felt that they could not stand. Those with weaker qigong had already fallen down. There were also many who hugged trees and did not know what to do. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the shaking stopped. As for how much the peak sank, it was only a feeling and not something that could be measured. Honorable Cult Master, this subordinate will send someone to investigate. Senior Nun Xuezhen's face was anxious. She bowed and was about to leave when Senior Nun Jingyi said sternly, Junior Martial Sister Xuezhen, there's no need to be anxious. Pass down the order immediately. First, find some capable people to go to Jinghai Lake and see if there's anything wrong with our fragrant cult's great protective formation. Nun Jingyi turned around and said to Peacock, Peacock, send the best people from Ruijin Palace to assist Elder Xuezhen. Take down all the spies in our sect leader Xuezhen, no matter which sect they are from or what position they hold. If there's any resistance, kill them all. Peacock was stunned. She immediately bowed and said, Yes, sect leader. Nun Xuezhen was also stunned. She asked, Sect leader being this? Without waiting for Abbess Xuezhen to finish speaking, a series of 12 sounds rang out in the distance. It was none other than 12 blood-red signals that had been released. Nun Jingyi was not the only one who was shocked. She asked loudly, This is the direction of Jiuhua Peak? How did they send the most urgent signal? Could it be that the Tenryu sect is attacking Jiuhua Peak? Qin asked anxiously. How is that possible? If the Tenryu sect is attacking, it's Jinghai Lake that sent the signal. Peacock frowned. At this moment, a disciple of Ruijin Palace hurriedly came over with a disciple of Immerse Palace. When he saw Nun Jingyi, he shouted, Sect leader Bing, our Lingxiang Peak's protective array? What's wrong with the protective array? Nun Jingyi calmed down when she heard this. Disciple also doesn't know. Just now, Lingering Fragrance Peak was shaking. When we were patrolling at the foot of the mountain, we saw that Lingering Fragrance Peak had sunk a lot. There were also many brilliant lights flashing in the air. It was abnormally bright. When the shaking stopped, the disciples outside of Lingering Fragrance Peak, could actually see the true scenery of the peak. The protective array. Qin could not help but shout, I'm afraid it's gone. Don't talk nonsense. Peacock heard this and immediately scolded. What Qin said might be true. Nun Jingyi shook her head slightly. She looked worriedly at the 12 blood-red signals in the sky and said, Let's go and take a look. When they arrived at Lingxiang Peak, other people might not know, but Nun Jingyi scanned with her divine sense. How could she not know? Her eyes flickered as she looked at the original protective array. After a while she ordered, Junior Sister Xuezhen, Peacock, immediately send out the elite disciples. Mobilize the disciples of Wuming Hall and quickly go to Jinghai Lake to set up a defense. If the protective array is like this, then there's probably a problem with the protective array. Also, send disciples to Jiuhua Peak to see what's going on. Yes. Both of them bowed. Also, pass down my order. All the inner disciples of Lingxiang Peak should immediately get ready. Those who are in seclusion should all come out. Our Lingxiang sect is facing a turning point. Turning point? Everyone was surprised, but they also seemed to be deep in thought. That's right. The Lingxiang sect has been protected by the protective array of the Immortal Path for a long time, but now the Immortal Path has been destroyed for tens of thousands of years. The chi of heaven and earth is scarce. There are always heaven-defying methods, but there will be a time when they run out of power. This moment will come sooner or later, but it will come sooner than we expected. But elders, there's no need to be afraid. The Lingxiang sect belongs to the Jianghu, and the Jianghu also belongs to the Lingxiang sect. We've just returned to the Jianghu. We've already prepared for this. This preparation was originally left for Peacock, but now we can only reluctantly do it. When the elders heard Nun Jingyi's order to check Jinghai Lake and the protective array, their hearts were beating wildly. They were both surprised and happy. Only when Nun Jingyi confirmed it again did someone ask, Sir Leader, do you mean that from now on the Lingxiang sect will be like an ordinary sect in the Jianghu? We can move around the Jianghu often? Nun Jingyi glanced at her and nodded. I know. Because of the sect's rules, you can only guard the incense sect. Now that the sect's protective array is gone, we've returned to the Jianghu. Of course you can. The protective array? How could it be gone? But there hasn't been any news? Sir Leader, how could? The impatient Chin Chin asked anxiously. Silly child, I have my ways. Nun Jingyi sighed when she saw that she could only release her divine sense to a range of 200 feet. The disciples? Won't it be another year before we can get out of the passage? Chin Chin was still worried, but his eyes were shining with joy. You. Nun Jingyi smiled bitterly. What she was worried about was not known by disciples like Chin Chin. Chin Chin's thoughts were simpler and more direct. Chapter 954. Why is this happening? Why are they all running down the mountain? And why is it so messy? Zhang Xiaohua immediately concealed himself after emerging from the ground. He was surprised when he saw the disciples running down the 9 Radiance Peak. It's just that the underground dragon vein is empty. The entire 9 Radiance Peak has sunk a little. Is there a need to be so scared? After that, Zhang Xiaohua puckered his lips and formed seals with his hand. He was just about to fly away when he heard 12 enormous bangs resound in succession, and 12 blood-red signals flew up into the sky from halfway up 9 Radiance Peak. What signal is that? Zhang Xiaohua didn't quite understand. However, when he saw the disciples running away in panic, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "It's not dangerous. You guys can run for now. I should be near the Shilling Peak now. I won't be accompanying you." As he spoke, he used the flight technique and flew towards Shilling Peak. In just half a day, Zhang Xiaohua arrived near the Shilling Peak. When he landed, he was surprised. Something's not right. There seems to be something different. Why is the energy of heaven and earth in the fragrant cult getting thinner? Although it's just a little thinner, it's not normal. I've been here for so long and I've never seen such a situation. While he was puzzled, Zhang Xiaohua released his divine sense. However, the moment he released his divine sense, Zhang Xiaohua almost fell down in shock. He was pleasantly surprised. What's wrong? My divine sense can see so far? Of course, the Shilling Peak was not far away. If it was a normal day, how could he see it with his divine sense? At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua could see more than half of the Shilling Peak with his divine sense. How could Zhang Xiaohua not be surprised? Could it be that my divine sense improved after last night's refinement? Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. But the fragrant cult's divine sense cultivation method is only for controlling the divine sense. It doesn't have any effect on strengthening the divine sense. Could it be the sect-protecting formation that suppresses my consciousness? It's possible. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes flickered as he thought of the restriction he had broken last night. I don't think so. Could it be that the sect-protecting array of the incense cult was destroyed by me? At the same time, Zhang Xiaohua recalled that in the Huan Su, Wan Wuxin had told her about Yu Mingxin and Yang Haoye setting up the array together. Could it be that green gourd is the powerful magic weapon they obtained here? And the dragon vein is a part of their formation? I don't know where the dragon vein went, but the green gourd was taken by I. Oh no, isn't this the legendary taking drastic measures? I am in trouble now. Zhang Xiaohua frowned and looked at the Shilling Peak in the distance. She thought to herself, let's not talk about the sect-protecting formation first. Now that such a huge change has happened to the fragrant cult, I have to return to Lingering Fragrance Peak. At this time, no one will be concerned about me. Abish Jingyi won't link me to Abish Jinggang's death, right? However, before returning to Lingering Fragrance Peak, I have to be careful. The money pouch, belt and other items have not been refined. Now that my divine sense has recovered and I can even use my natal energy, I have to deal with them properly. I don't want Abish Jingyi to find out anything. Zhang Xiaohua found a secluded place and used the jade talisman to set up a restriction. Then she got busy. A few days later, when they were half a day away from Lingering Fragrance Peak, Zhang Xiaohua sat cross-legged on Huanwan's back and looked at the mountain path thoughtfully. Many disciples were riding their horses and rushing to different places. It seems like a huge change has happened. If not, why is this mountain path so crowded when there aren't many disciples? Not to mention the inner disciples, even the outer disciples have come down from the mountain and are trying to find out what happened. Just as she was thinking, there was a rush of horse hooves and a group of masked female disciples galloped from the front. Don't tell me they are the messengers from Mo Sun Gong? Zhang Xiaohua's eyes turned and she patted Huanwan's head before moving to the side of the road. There were other disciples hurrying to and fro on the mountain path. When they saw the group of female disciples, they dodged to the side like Zhang Xiaohua and opened up a path for them. After a while, most of the female disciples galloped past Zhang Xiaohua. However, when the last female disciple galloped past, The red horse's front hooves suddenly stopped and it lost its balance. The female disciple was quite alert. She patted the horse's back and leaped off the horse in an attempt to land on the ground. However, at this moment her left leg coincidentally touched something on the saddle. The blood in her body stagnated and her internal energy was insufficient. She lost control of her body and slammed into a person on the mountain path. This situation happened so suddenly that the female disciple was caught off guard. Just as she was about to collide with the male disciple on the mountain path stretched out his hand and took out a sword embryo from the back of his mount. He casually stretched out his hand and flicked the sword embryo at the female disciple's waist. With just a little bit of force, the female disciple flew up. At this time, the female disciple's blood and chi had returned to normal. She borrowed the force of the sword embryo and slowly floated down. Before she could stabilize herself, the female disciple's face revealed a trace of surprise. She cupped her hands and said, "This, junior brother, thank you for your help." The male disciple grinned and said, "There is no need for that. We are all from Immerse Gong. It is only right for us to help each other." Immerse Gong's fellow disciples? The female disciple frowned. She looked at the sword embryo in the male disciple's hand and suddenly realized something. She smiled and said, "I was wondering who had such great strength. So it is junior brother Ren." The male disciple cupped his hands and said, "Senior sister, you must be joking. I am Ren Xiaoyao. I just came back from the outside." Then he looked at the group of disciples who were already far away and said, "I wonder, what happened in the sect? Why is it so noisy? Also, Immerse Gong's senior sister went out in such a large group?" The female disciple looked at the date red horse that fell to the ground and immediately jumped up. She was a bit worried and said, "Junior brother Ren, did you not feel the earth shaking a few days ago?" Zhang Xiaohua realized something and said, "Of course I know about the shaking. Almost all of the shaking caused me to fall off the cliff. Could it be related to the shaking?" The female disciple nodded and said, "Because of the shaking, our fragrance sex protection formation was activated. Now we are completely exposed to the world of martial arts. Everything from the past will change. We have received orders from the sect master to pass down the order. As for the specific details, junior brother Ren should go back to Lingering Fragrance Peak to ask." As she spoke, the female disciple cupped her hands and bid farewell. She turned around and mounted the date red horse. After galloping a few steps, she turned around and said with a smile, "Sect master has decreed that all disciples in closed-door cultivation must come out. Senior sister Zixia should be among them." Then a bell-like laughter sounded and gradually went away. "Meng has come out of closed-door cultivation?" Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. She patted Huanhuan's bald horn and the David's deer flew away. In less than half a day, Zhang Xiaohua arrived at the foot of the Lingering Fragrance Peak. At this time, the Lingering Fragrance Peak was different from before. Although there was no longer a sentry post every 5 steps or 10 steps, there would be a hidden sentry post at every certain distance. When he arrived at the mountain pass, it was even more exaggerated. A few disciples of the vigorous Golden Palace were standing there with weapons in their hands. They looked around with serious eyes. They had the same expression as the guards under the ethereal sect's memorial archway. Zhang Xiaohua rode on the David's deer and used her divine sense to scan the surroundings. She secretly said, "The fragrant sect has not been in the world of martial arts for a long time. They have long lost the habits of the world of martial arts. Now that the sect's protection formation is gone, they are suddenly thrown into the world of martial arts. If they are not well prepared, it will be like forcing ducks to a perch." This thick tablet seems to have changed. However, when she saw the disciples of Ruijin Palace staring at her from not far away, Zhang Xiaohua walked past the thick tablet as if nothing had happened. "Stand there." When the disciple saw Zhang Xiaohua approaching, he scolded, "Which palace's disciple are you? Take out your waist token and check it." "Waist token? Check it?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. However, when she used her divine sense to scan the surroundings, she was stunned. What's wrong? The peak's protection formation is also gone? While he was in doubt, Zhang Xiaohua took out her waist token and handed it over. She asked, "This? Senior martial brother, in the past when I entered Lingering Fragrance Peak, I didn't need to check my waist token. Why, after I left for dozens of days, this rule changed." "Shut up," the disciple said angrily, "it's just checking your waist token. Why are you talking so much?" However, when he saw Zhang Xiaohua's waist token, he couldn't help but be dumbfounded. He frowned and asked curiously, Why, why is your waist token Emo Gong's? Zhang Xiaohua was even more puzzled. She asked back, Senior Marshal Brother, were you not in Ruijin Palace a month ago? Yes. I went to Shilin Peak for business and just returned 10 days ago. The disciple didn't understand. Seeing that it was Emo Gong's waist token, he was respectful. Does Emo Gong have male disciples? If a male disciple took Emo Gong's waist token, who could it be? Senior Marshal Brother, have you not heard of the guardian disciples of our fragrant religion? Speaking of this, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel a little proud. Ruijin Palace was destroyed by her. Now that she mentioned it in front of the disciples of Ruijin Palace who didn't know the details, how could she not be proud? Guardian disciple Ren Xiaoyao? The disciple took half a step back and looked at the very young face in front of him in surprise. Zhang Xiaohua cupped her hands and said, That's me. Senior Marshal Brother, can I go up the mountain now? Haha, of course you can. So it's the guardian disciple of our religion. I'm Wang Ming. I've long heard of Junior Marshal Brother's deeds. I didn't expect to meet you here. Please go up the mountain. Wang Ming returned the waist token to Zhang Xiaohua and made way for the path up the mountain. He cupped his hands and said, Well said, well said. Zhang Xiaohua also cupped her hands with a smile. Then they followed the mountain path all the way to Emo Gong. Inside Emo Shen's palace, Nun Jingyi was seated high above. Below her were several elders. Below them were several white-haired old men. Among them, there were 3 who looked extremely similar and attracted the most attention. At this time, everyone was no longer as panicked as before. They sat in their chairs and listened to Nun Jingyi say, Now that the fragrant religion is open, everyone in Jianghu will know about it sooner or later. Instead of that, it's better to act early, to set up in advance. Chapter 955. Set up in advance? Everyone looked at Nun Jingyi, not understanding. Nun Shuizhen probed, I don't understand what you mean, Hierarch Lord. Although we had a sect-protecting formation in the past, we still have many disciples in the Jianghu. Although we can't compare with Dalan Temple and the Righteous Alliance, we can't underestimate them. This kind of setup. Haha, junior sister Shuizhen is right. Those are the forces of our fragrant religion. They are all the arrangements made by our ancestors. Our religion's intention is just to make the first move when we appear in Jianghu. Make the first move? Nun Jingfan asked curiously, Please enlighten me. Our ancestors once said that the appearance of the fragrant religion would cause chaos in the Jianghu. Since we, the fragrant religion, have appeared in the Jianghu, we might disrupt the current structure of the Jianghu. A storm of blood may be unavoidable, but if we make the first move before the other sects react, wouldn't it be advantageous for us? Peacock said, You are far-sighted. I can't compare. Qinshin quickly added, That's right, that's right. What good plan do you have? Tell us. Nun Jingyi smiled, There's no such thing as far-sighted or scheming. It's just that I'm in a position. Besides, there are some things that I've been thinking about. Now that Jianghu has reopened, it's just that we're starting ahead of schedule. When she saw the people's gazes, Nun Jingyi said, Since incense cult has returned to the world of martial artists, then, we should greet our old friends in the world of martial artists. We have decided that in 3 months, we will hold a martial arts tournament on Incense Cult's Huayu Peak. We will invite all the major sects in the world of martial artists to Incense Cult. Although it was a question, there was no denying it. Everyone was stunned at first, then a trace of fanaticism flashed in their eyes. They clapped and laughed, You're wise and far-sighted. We can't compare to you. Nun Shuizhen nodded, I'm still thinking about how to get along with the sects in Jianghu. With this martial arts convention, not only will the news of Jianghu's reappearance spread, but it will also show our strength. It'll make everyone admire us. It's killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Then, are there any arena matches? Qinshin asked anxiously from the side. When the people of Jianghu gather together, of course they will discuss martial arts and swordsmanship. The competition in the arena should be indispensable. If the cult of incense wants to establish its prestige in Jianghu, it must be done. Abbess Jingfan looked at Qinshin and the silent peacock and said with a smile, Well, that's right. Is there any news about First Elder Jinggang? Nun Jingyi asked Nun Shuizhen calmly. Abbess Shuizhen took a look at Peacock and stood up. Your subordinate is stupid. Peacock and I sent out disciples to kidnap quite a number of the spies, but there was no improvement. Since that's the case, I'd rather kill 1,000 by mistake than let one go. Kill the chicken to scare the monkey. Well? Abbess Shuezhen was ultimately compassionate. She probed, wouldn't that be killing too many? A cold smile appeared on Jing Yi's face. Jianghu is a dangerous place. Our incense order respects women, so who knows how many rascals covet it. Now that our incense order has returned to Jianghu, it's time to establish our might. Moreover, after the Martial Arts Society convention, how can we get along with those sects peacefully? Our incense order has to have a share of the pie in Jianghu. Kill, kill, kill. If we don't kill, our first elder will have no one to accompany him in his sacrifice, right? Yes, Your Excellency. Abbess Shuezhen did not dare to disobey and said in a low voice. Also, immediately send a disciple to send a message to Ming Qing. The plan has changed. Tell him to complete the task within 3 months. Yes, your subordinate understands. At this time, Qin Qin smiled again and said, Your Excellency, since the Martial Arts Society convention is going to be held, then, how do we inform the major sects? Are we going to send disciples out again? Seeing Qin Qin's eager look, Abbess Jingyi smiled. You little girl, you're only thinking about going out to play. Sigh, now that the door is open, you'll have plenty of opportunities to go out in the future. Why are you in such a hurry? These children are so pitiful. They've never been to Jianghu alone, so how can they know how dangerous it is? They all think that they're going out to play like messengers. Abbess Jingfan said lovingly. However, what Qin Qin said is also reasonable. Today I'm telling you about the Martial Arts Society convention because I want to discuss with the elders who will go out. Since we're holding the Martial Arts Society convention, we must send out the invitations. Ah. Everyone laughed. Peacock said, The inner disciples of our incense order have little experience in Jianghu and they're all women. The matter of inviting the sects is quite tricky. However, if we let the disciples of Ruijin Temple do it, it'll be disrespectful. I think that the major sects should send some disciples of Mo Xian Temple to send the invitations. As for the smaller sects, only the disciples of Ruijin Temple should go. Peacock's words make sense. Abbess Jingyi nodded. It's similar to what I'm thinking. Well, Peacock is a disciple of our incense order. She'll send the invitations to the Tenryu sect to show our respect for them. That's great. Your Excellency, do you want people from the Dalan Temple and the Righteous Alliance to go as well? What do you think of me? Qin Qin clamored. Nun Jingyi ignored her and looked at Yu Yin. She smiled and said, Yu Yin and this junior sister Shuezhen have not only surpassed their master in martial arts, they have also learned to be calm. The Righteous Alliance has always been restless, so I'll let you go. Yu Yin was neither haughty nor humble. She stood up and saluted. I'll follow your orders. Abbess Jingyi looked at Abbess Jingfan and said, As for the other sects' invitations, I'll let junior sister Jingfan and junior sister Shuezhen worry about them. Let the reliable disciples of Ruijin Temple send them. Qin Qin pouted when she saw that there was nothing for her to do. She felt wronged. Your Excellency, this disciple is also a disciple of inheritance. The Dalan Temple hasn't sent anyone yet. Why don't they send a disciple? You? Abbess Jingyi saw this and shook her head. There are only 3 disciples of inheritance in this generation. Peacock and Yu Yin have already gone out. How can you go? Moreover, your junior sister Peacock. You're in charge of Ruijin Temple. While Peacock and Yu Yin are out, you should take charge and familiarize yourself with the affairs of Ruijin Temple. But Qin Qin was still reluctant. Shimujuan will be back soon. Let him sit and do the boring things. This disciple will go to the Dalan Temple on behalf of your Excellency. Abbess Jingyi smiled bitterly. She pointed at Qin Qin and scolded with a smile. You little girl, there are so many people in Mo Nua Temple who are eyeing the position of Ruijin Temple. You're good. I let you sit there but you don't want to. You just have to run outside. However, the Dalan Temple is a Buddhist holy land. It has a bad habit of not letting women in. Even if you go, the monks of the Dalan Temple won't let you in. Wouldn't it be a loss of face for my Xiangjiao? There's such a saying? Qin Qin was stunned. She scolded, They're all raised by their parents. Why can only men enter but not women? No wonder everyone in the world calls them bald donkeys. Everyone laughed. Even Abbess Jingyi couldn't help laughing. She pointed at Qin Qin and wanted to say something but she couldn't. Abbess Jingfan said, Your Excellency is right. The Dalan Temple is a troublesome place. The Tenryu sect and the Righteous Alliance are both invited by the inherited disciples. If the Dalan Temple isn't an inherited disciple, it would be rude of us. But if Qin Qin also goes, all 3 of us inherited disciples will go out. It's really inappropriate. What can we do? What can we do? Abbess Shuizhen smiled. Maybe when Shimujuan comes back, he's the eldest disciple of Ruijin Temple. Although he's not an inherited disciple, he can still go. Yes, Shimujuan is the first candidate to go to the Dalan Temple. Abbess Jingyi nodded. But it's been a few days since the Guardian Array was opened. He should have returned long ago. Why is he still? While they were talking, Abbess Jingyi scanned the outside with her divine sense. She was delighted and smiled. I have another idea. The second candidate to go to the Dalan Temple has been chosen. The second candidate? Qinshan was stunned. He shouted, Shimujuan can go, I won't fight with him. How can there be another candidate? Who is it? Abbess Jingyi said, disciples outside, bring in guardian disciple Ren Xiaoyao. Ren Xiaoyao? Qinshan's expression changed slightly. He looked at the entrance of the hall. In just a short moment, a slender figure appeared at the entrance of Immerse Palace. Wasn't that Zhang Xiaohua? Zhang Xiaohua walked into the hall and saw that it was filled with people. There was also a jade coffin in the middle of the hall. He was astonished. After meeting Abbess Jingyi and the others, Zhang Xiaohua looked at the jade coffin again. He didn't ask anything and just stood at the bottom. Qinshan sized up Zhang Xiaohua with his big black eyes. He seemed to feel that there was something different about Zhang Xiaohua, but he couldn't tell what it was. Ren Xiaoyao, did you gain anything from this trip? Abbess Jingyi suddenly asked after a moment of silence. Yes. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he said calmly, I followed sect master's orders and went to a few mountains. I investigated openly and secretly and obtained some information. I also found out that there were some spies. After that, Zhang Xiaohua told her what he knew. Of course, he didn't mention anything about Lei Hong from the Greenwood Palace. In the end, he cupped his hands and said, I know that sect master is wise and everything is under your control. Therefore, I didn't dare to act rashly and alert the enemy. You are considerate. Abbess Jingyi said coldly, however, are you still hiding something from me? Hiding something from sect master? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. He asked curiously, I told you everything in detail and didn't hide anything? Is that so? Abbess Jingyi said coldly, you didn't kill Grand Elder Jing Gang? Huh? Zhang Xiaohua was so shocked that his mouth opened so wide that a goose egg could fit in it. Before he could say anything, a strand of divine sense swept past and wrapped around Zhang Xiaohua's neck. You still won't admit it? Grand Elder Jing Gang left Lingxiang Peak to hunt you down. Now that his corpse is on Xiling Peak, isn't that where you went? You still want to quibble? After that, the divine sense tightened and was about to strangle Zhang Xiaohua's neck. Chapter 956. Sir Hierarch, you are wise. Zhang Xiaohua anxiously scratched at his neck, as if he wanted to grab hold of Nun Jingyi's divine sense. He argued, this disciple knows that this disciple has caused Grand Elder Jing Gang to misunderstand me, so I received sect master's decree to leave immediately after recovering from my injuries. Even when I was at the foot of the mountain, I didn't dare to reveal my whereabouts. During this period of time, this disciple was very afraid that Grand Elder Jing Gang would suddenly appear. I was always nervous. It wasn't until I set foot in Immerse Palace that I felt at ease. Only in front of sect master did I feel a sense of security. I've been to Xiling Peak but I have never seen Great Elder Jing Gang. Moreover, Sir Hierarch, if I had seen Great Elder Jing Gang, would I still be standing in Immerse Palace? Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, if I had the skills to kill Great Elder Jing Gang, would I still need to hide? Nun Jingyi's face was hidden under the veil and her emotions could not be seen. Everyone in the hall, except for Qinshan who looked anxious and Peacock who was looking down at the ground, looked at Zhang Xiaohua with interest and did not speak. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Nun Jingyi's divine sense was retracted. Whether you killed him or not, you are the most suspicious. Nun Jingyi said coldly, Shimujuan has always hated you. When he returns from his training, you will be in for it. Zhang Xiaohua laughed coldly in her heart but her face was awkward. She said, Sir Hierarch, I have been wronged. You have been wronged. Perhaps I know. Even if Shimujuan knows, he may not be able to let it go. Unless you can find Yu Zhuochuan. I have only seen senior brother Yu once. I don't even know what he looks like now. Where do you want me to find him? This is really difficult for me. I can point you out a way to get you out of this predicament temporarily. Really? Zhang Xiaohua pretended to be overjoyed and said anxiously, Sir Hierarch, please enlighten me. I'm very grateful. You've been on your way back. Do you know what happened in the church? Yes, this disciple has asked the senior sister who sent the message, so I know a little. Zhang Xiaohua answered honestly. That's good. Now that the fragrant order has reappeared in the pugilistic world, you can go out at any time. If you go out, won't Shi Mujuan be unable to find you? Zhang Xiaohua's face lit up with joy, but she immediately became discouraged. Disciples' martial arts are not complete yet. Even if I can leave, what can I do? If senior martial brother Shi wants to find me, he will find me no matter what. Disciples should stay by Lord Cult Leader's side, only then will it be safer. Bah! Nun Jingyi laughed and scolded, since when did our cult let you run away? This sect only wants you to make a trip to the pugilistic world. When Shi Mujuan returns and finds the murderer who killed Great Elder Jing Gang, he won't vent his anger on you. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua's face lit up with joy. Yes, this time it was genuine joy. She smiled and said, Thank you, Lord Cult Leader, for granting my wish. Thank you, Lord Cult Leader, for your concern. You're really a living bodhisattva who saves people in distress. Bah! Nun Jingyi scolded again. I haven't even told you and you've already brought up the Dalan Temple's shady business. Qin Qin, tell him what happened. Qin Qin's expression was strange. She said, Ren Xiaoyao, consider yourself lucky. You actually snatched away this senior sister's good thing. Then she told him about the invitation. Zhang Xiaohua was enlightened after hearing this and laughed secretly. The heavens are really helping me. She bowed to the ground again. Thank you, Lord Cult Leader, for granting my wish. Thank you, Senior Sister Qin, for granting my wish. This cult leader will make it clear to you first. Rest at Lingxiang Peak for 2 days. If Shi Mujuan returns, he will naturally go and it has nothing to do with you. Of course, if he goes, he won't find trouble with you. This cult leader won't go back on his words. If he doesn't return, it will be your turn to go. Yes, this disciple understands. Yes, if you go, you must remember that you're the guardian disciple of our cult leader. You're under the direct command of Mo Xingong. You're even higher than the disciples of Ruijin Temple. Don't lose face in front of the Dalan Temple. If there's any news, this cult leader won't give you any face. But this disciple's martial arts are weak. I'm afraid. Zhang Xiaohua said the unpleasant words up front. Don't worry. Nun Jingyi waved her hand. You're still young and the only guardian disciple of our cult leader. Even if the Dalan Temple makes things difficult for you, they have to restrain themselves. You don't have to be too afraid. The cult leader is wise. Letting Ren Xiaoyao, a guardian disciple with weak martial arts, go to the Dalan Temple is giving the Dalan Temple face by sending the only guardian disciple of Mo Xingong. Secondly, it's respecting the Dalan Temple's rule of not allowing women to enter. Both sects don't have to make things difficult for him. The most amazing thing is that our guardian disciple is young and his martial arts aren't high. Only his strength is unparalleled. He's going to make things difficult for the Dalan Temple. Nun Jingfan praised from the side. Nun Jingyi smiled but didn't say anything. She seemed to have other plans in mind. Nun Jingfan continued, It's just a pity that Ren Xiaoyao became a guardian disciple and separated from Zixia. The last time he came back, Zixia was in seclusion. Although he can see her this time, he has to leave again in 2 days. It's like 2 birds flying together. Zhang Xiaohua rolled her eyes in her heart. She thought, where did Nun Jingfan learn to enlighten people? Is this called 2 birds flying together? I have an idea but I don't know if I should say it. Nun Jingfan looked at Nun Jingyi with a smile. There's no harm in saying it. Ren Xiaoyao is young and doesn't have much experience in Jianghu. We should send a disciple of Ruijin Temple to follow him. However, he broke into Yixiang and offended Ruijin Temple. They might not care about him. Zixia is careful and she is also a couple with Ren Xiaoyao. If Zixia accompanies him to the Dalan Temple, she is the disciple of senior sister Jing Xian. Her status is second only to the successor disciples. If the Dalan Temple doesn't understand why we send a guardian disciple, won't Zixia show our respect to the Dalan Temple? Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed when she heard this. She didn't care about Nun Jingfan's wrong words. She almost wanted to call Nun Jingfan her Excellency Hierarch. Nun Jingyi was also happy when she heard this. She clapped her hands and said, Good. Once Zixia goes, Ren Xiaoyao's position as a guardian disciple will be confirmed. It will be difficult for the Dalan Temple to find fault. Whether it's for public or private reasons, Zixia should go. Peacock's eyes were still looking at the ground. Chen Chen's face was full of resentment. He opened his mouth and said, "Master, why are you so partial to this guardian disciple? You even let him take a couple on the road? Are they going to deliver the invitation or to laugh proudly in Jianghu?" "Ah, it's both." Nanjing Fan smiled. To help others, to push the boat with the current, or to satisfy both sides, anyone would be willing to do it. Nun Shuezhen looked at the few elders who had been silent all this time. She asked, "Excellency Hierarch, should we invite a few elders to accompany the disciples when they go out? To ensure their safety?" Nun Jingyi thought for a moment and waved her hand. "No need. This is a diplomatic trip. Even if there are some grudges with some sects, there's no need to think about it. If there are any sects that don't know their place, this martial arts convention will be an opportunity." Then Nun Jingyi waved her hand and dismissed Zhang Xiaohua. She didn't even let him pay his respects to Nanjing Gang's corpse. It was as if she had forgotten about this matter. Zhang Xiaohua left Immerse Palace and went straight to his room. Everything was the same as before. He knew that Meng had come out of seclusion but didn't know that he was back. When he was about to go out to look for her, he heard hurried footsteps. Without using his divine sense, Zhang Xiaohua could tell that it was Meng. Seeing Meng's thick eyebrows, white face and pure eyes, Zhang Xiaohua smiled in his heart. He went forward and said, "Meng, how did you know I was back?" Then, his hand held Meng's hand without leaving a trace. Meng blushed and struggled a few times. In the end, she let him hold her hand. She lowered her head and said shyly, "The junior sister on duty saw you and immediately informed me. I didn't expect you to be so popular." Zhang Xiaohua looked at the shy Meng with a smile. "It's nothing. You're just a disciple of a guardian. Otherwise, who would know about me?" "Really?" Zhang Xiaohua touched his nose and said, I'm already low-key enough. How can I still attract so much attention? Then you have to teach me how to not attract attention. I just want to protect your eyes." Meng laughed and blushed. She said, "You have a good feeling." Then she held Zhang Xiaohua's hand and said worriedly, "I heard. Senior sister Qinshin said that great elder Jing Gang wanted to harm you. I was very worried. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have been so foolish." "Look at what you're saying." Zhang Xiaohua let go of her hand and moved a strand of messy hair away from the corner of Meng's eyes. He stroked Meng's black hair and said with heartache, Shirtai can rest in peace now that you've done this for her. I have 9 lives. Even if Yu Zhuochuan wanted to kill me, she couldn't. Even if Nanjing Gang wanted to kill me, she couldn't. Even if Shi Mujuan wanted to kill me, he couldn't. Senior brother, she wanted to kill you?" Meng said in surprise. "Hasn't he not returned to the mountain yet?" Zhang Xiaohua saw that she accidentally let it slip and quickly changed the topic. "Right, I just found out that Nanjing Gang was killed in Immerse's palace. Do you know who killed her?" Meng shook her head. "How would I know? I just heard that great elder died. I was worried that you were killed by her. I just felt relieved when I heard that you're back. Xiaohua, it's so good to see you alive." "Yes, me too. I couldn't help but come back earlier when I thought of you waiting for me at Lingxiang Peak. Right, I have good news for you." "Good news?" Meng Qi said, "Is it related to me? Or yours?" Zhang Xiaohua said mysteriously, "Of course it's related to you and me." "Yes?" If it was Nye Qinyu, she would have tilted her head and thought, but Meng shook her head. "If you want to tell me now. If you don't, I don't want to hear it either." Chapter 957. Zhang Xiaohua felt helpless and said, "Meng, can you not be so boring?" "I'm boring, who would bother you to look for me?" Seeing that Meng was angry, Zhang Xiaohua quickly said, Okay, I'll tell you now." Then, Zhang Xiaohua told her about the sect protecting spell and the martial arts convention. I know about the sect protecting spell. Lord Leader pulled out all the disciples who were in seclusion to deal with this matter, but the martial arts convention? It should be a grand occasion. I'm really looking forward to it." Meng's eyes shone with a longing look. Zhang Xiaohua was a little confused. "Don't you want to go out for a walk? Go to the Dalan temple to send an invitation?" "Che." Meng laughed. "That's senior brother Shi's business. What does it have to do with you and me? Lord Sect Leader is just encouraging you. That might not be the case. If Shi Mujuan doesn't come back, doesn't that mean we can go? The sect protecting spell is such a big matter, how can senior brother Shi not come back? Xiaohua, you should think more about how to make senior brother Shi not suspect you." Meng saw Zhang Xiaohua's nonchalant look and frowned slightly. she asked curiously. Could it be, you're so sure that Lord Leader will send you and me to the Dalan Temple? How could it be? Zhang Xiaohua changed the topic and smiled. Now that the incense cult is open, we'll have plenty of chances to fight side by side in the martial world. If we don't succeed this time, there'll be a next time. Bah who wants to fight side by side with you? Meng said, her cheeks flushed. Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat and she held Meng's hand even tighter. The two of them looked at the secluded place and chatted until the sky turned dark. Then they reluctantly parted. Zhang Xiaohua returned to his room and thought for a moment. Then, his figure disappeared into the ground. He didn't dare to go too deep into the ground. Following his memory, he arrived at the mountain path. Then he jumped out of the ground and hid his figure. He carefully went down the lingering fragrance peak. He waited until he was outside the mountain. Then he soared into the sky and used the flying technique to go straight to the first faith peak. Back in the day, Zhang Xiaohua rode the David's deer from the first faith peak to the lingering fragrance peak. It took him a few days, but it only made Zhang Pinger extremely worried in the distant fire hall. Cough cough, of course, it was also Zhang Xiaohua's fault for taking the time to go to the weapon refining hall to get a few useful artifacts. That unremarkable little mirror had saved Zhang Xiaohua many times. In fact, Zhang Xiaohua thought more than once. Since Nanjing Yi and Nanjing Gang also had divine senses, some elders in Immerse Palace should also have divine senses. But why did the small mirror, the crimson spirit shield, and the unknown bracelet in the human pavilion all fall into her hands? Could it be that she had a good character? But on Lingxiang Peak, she saw that almost every disciple had some magic tool fragments in their hands. Then, in the life and death battle with Nanjing Gang, she saw the Jialan plate. And that was a magic tool that Nanjing Gang did not use. Zhang Xiaohua knew that it was not that she had a good character. It was just that Nanjing Gang did not like it. Nanjing Yi had divine senses. Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to use her divine senses to check. She must have a more powerful magic tool on her that she could not compare to. As for the small mirror, Zhang Xiaohua also had a trace of understanding. Didn't the founder of the immortal Dao, Huan Wuxin, say that before the immortal Dao there was a cultivation world? Moreover, this world was also strange. There were Dharma artifacts that were even more powerful than the immortal Dao. These Dharma artifacts couldn't be discovered by divine sense alone. The small mirror might belong to this category. As for the Crimson Spirit Shield, it was something that Abbess Jingyi didn't care about. Of course, the green gourd should be the magic tool that the founder of the fragrant religion, Yu Mingxin, used in the cultivation world in the past. It should be the same as the small mirror in her hand. The flying technique was indeed wonderful. In less than an hour, Zhang Xiaohua arrived at Shixing Peak. Seeing hundreds of Wuming Hall disciples guarding the mountain path in front of Shixing Peak, Zhang Xiaohua knew that this must be an order from Nanjing Yi to prevent the Misty School disciples from doing anything strange. However, the disciples of Ruijin Hall on Lingxiang Peak could not discover Zhang Xiaohua, who secretly went down the mountain. How could the disciples of Wuming Hall detect Zhang Xiaohua going up the mountain? There was no one in Zhang Xiaohu's room. The oil lamp was lit and there was a half-opened book on the table. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the familiar room and sat on the chair with a smile. She picked up the book and read it with great interest. After a long time, the sound of light footsteps came from the courtyard. Zhang Xiaohua listened and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. Zhang Xiaohu pushed the door and entered. When he saw that there was someone in the room, he was shocked at first. Then he was overjoyed. He looked back at the pitch-black courtyard and closed the door. He smiled and said, "Xiaohua? Why are you here now?" Zhang Xiaohua didn't answer. She looked at her second brother and said, "Second brother, people are in good spirits. Looking at your complexion, it's really good." Zhang Xiaohu stepped forward and looked around with joy in his eyes. Then he sat on the chair next to her and said with a smile, "No matter how good I am not as good as you. The female alchemist disciple on Lingxiang Peak is good, isn't she? Is she much better than Ye Qinyu?" Zhang Xiaohua did not know whether to laugh or cry. She waved her hands and said, "Second brother, don't tease me. What are you talking about? What? You go to Lingxiang Peak to be an alchemist disciple. Isn't it because of that little girl? If you don't hug her thigh, do you want to hug Qinchen's thigh?" Zhang Xiaohua showed a mischievous expression and said with a smile, "Second brother, this is what you said." "I never said it." Zhang Xiaohu suddenly realized and punched Zhang Xiaohua on the shoulder. He laughed and scolded, "Qinchen and I have a pure relationship." Zhang Xiaohua felt wronged and said curiously, "Second brother, I didn't say a word." Okay. Zhang Xiaohu curled his lips and stopped pestering. You have been to Lingxiang Peak for more than 2 months. Have you become an alchemist disciple? Let's not talk about that first. Second brother, why did you suddenly read a book? Zhang Xiaohua pointed at the book on the desk with interest and said with a smile. I can't not read. Xiaohua, we were poor in the past. When I was young, I didn't know how to read. I didn't know how powerful the contents of books were. Your second sister-in-law forced me to read the things in the book. Only then did I know that this is reality and history repeating itself. Only by reading more and thinking more can I have a clear view of people and be ahead of others. Upon hearing Zhang Xiaohu's words, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. That's right. He had been cultivating more, but he had read fewer books. Although the heavenly Tao was the truth of the heavenly Tao, the books contained the wisdom of his predecessors. It was also useful for him who lacked life experience. Ah, I understand. Second sister-in-law has high expectations of you. Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile. Oh, by the way, how is the martial arts exhibition going? I remember you were going to hold it when I left. Zhang Xiaohu spread his hands and said helplessly, what else can we do? You gave Ding Chao and Du Feng a meridian nourishing pill each. If they don't get the first and second place, wouldn't it be unfair to you? Second brother didn't go on stage? Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile. How could he not go on stage? He just took advantage of his injury to fight with the deputy hall master. But Ding Chao and Du Feng were not convinced. Haha, they rebelled against me. Zhang Xiaohua said, how about I give that, whatever pill to second brother tonight? Let you be awe-inspiring? Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohu's eyes lit up and he laughed foolishly. Then, that's good. Zhang Xiaohua was excited again. He extended his hand towards his money pouch, but just as his divine sense came into contact with the jade bottle of qi-generating pills, his heart unconsciously stirred. He once again took his hand out from his bosom and said while shaking his head, Second brother, I think it's better if you don't be so impatient. What? Zhang Xiaohu stared blankly. His eyes turned and he also came to a realization. He nodded and said, and you're right. Now that I've just become the head disciple, it's better to gain the trust of Lingering Fragrance Peak. If I break away from their control, who knows what accident might happen. And what second brother said makes sense. Moreover, not only that at this critical juncture, they've sent so many disciples to prevent your Misty Hall from changing. If you, senior, suddenly achieve great success, wouldn't it give Sir Leader a headache? Critical juncture? What do you mean? Zhang Xiaohua mysteriously said, these past few days the peak has been shaking. Second brother, aren't you curious about what happened? Nonsense, of course I'm curious. It's just, what would a little alchemy disciple like you know? Zhang Xiaohu said snappily. Hee, second brother, if you say so, then you're looking down on your Lingering Fragrance cult's only protector disciple. Protector disciple? Zhang Xiaohu stared blankly and asked curiously, is it you? Yes, it's your only brother Zhang Xiaohua Ren Xiaoyao. Che, Zhang Xiaohu's face was full of disdain. He asked again, I don't know how you tricked them. Alright, what's the deal with the shaking of the mountain? I asked Hall Master Yang and Vice Hall Master Yang, but they didn't know either. However, I heard from the disciples that a lot of outer disciples came down from Shishing Peak. I'm afraid it's not a good thing. How is it a bad thing? It's a good thing. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and told him about the opening of the restriction. Really? Zhang Xiaohu's eyes lit up when he heard the news. He grabbed Zhang Xiaohua's hand and said, Xiaohua, second brother? Second brother knows that you're very resourceful. You should take advantage of the opening of the restriction and spread the news that we're both alive to the Guizhuang house. Let father and mother rest assured. What do you think? Seeing Zhang Xiaohu's teary eyes, Zhang Xiaohua held his hand tightly and said with a smile, don't worry, second brother. I'm here for this matter. You're running away? Zhang Xiaohu asked curiously. No. Zhang Xiaohua shook his head and said, I'm just looking for a good job. I'll go out for a walk and settle our personal matters. Chapter 958. Zhang Xiaohu could not bear it and said anxiously, Xiaohua, what happened? You mean that you are more popular than me, the chief disciple of the Misty Hall in Lingxiang Peak? The inhibition was opened and we didn't even know about it. But you are going to go out immediately. Second brother, I have a good character, okay? Zhang Xiaohua was complacent and told him everything. No way. How could it be? You are so lucky. What? You are going to the Dalan temple? Zhang Xiaohua talked for a long time and Zhang Xiaohu's heart went up and down with him. Although he knew that Zhang Xiaohua was in front of him and did not lose a hair, he was his brother after all. How could he not be worried? The great master Chang'eng of the Dalan Temple has seen you. Don't be found out. How could it be? Zhang Xiaohua patted his chest and said, even Master Wen didn't find me, let alone monk Chang'eng. Yi Xiaohua, you are so lucky. First it was Nye Qinyu, then Zhang Pinger. There is a dream here. By the way, is Meng beautiful? How is she compared to Nye Qinyu? How is she compared to Zhang Pinger? Zhang Xiaohua was embarrassed. Second brother, Meng is the disciple of Shirtai and is also your senior sister. Oh yes. Zhang Xiaohu patted his forehead and said with a smile, I forgot about this. When I have a problem in martial arts, I will go to Lingxiang Peak to see my sister-in-law. I will check her for my parents first. Well, I think it's okay. Zhang Xiaohua did not show any weakness. It's better to ask second sister-in-law and Qin Qin. Well, I think it's okay. Zhang Xiaohu raised his eyebrows and said, if we call the two of them, even Ye Qinyu and Zhang Pinger will be watching. In the end, Zhang Xiaohua was not as thick-skinned as Zhang Xiaohu. She stamped her feet and said, all right, you won't be able to see it even if you want to. Dream of going to the Dalan Temple with me. That's great. Xiaohua, you don't have to send a letter. Just take your sister-in-law home and settle everything. Zhang Xiaohua was completely defeated. She rolled her eyes at Zhang Xiaohu and said, all right, second brother, don't make fun of your only brother. The opening of the incense cult seal is very bad for your Misty Hall. It may bring you some disaster. You should be careful. Okay, I understand. Zhang Xiaohu nodded solemnly. This was indeed not the right time to increase his inner strength. How is the situation in Misty Heights and Huanxi Heights? I don't know about Huanxi Heights. Miss O has never contacted Misty Hall, but I don't see any bad news. They should be fine. Under the leadership of Martial Ancestor Li, the Ethereal Mountain Villa is gradually moving closer to the Ethereal Hall. In the past 2 months they have been in contact with each other. Many of the martial uncles have gradually recovered their internal strength. Their broken bones are also slowly recovering. Perhaps they will recover soon. What about Captain He, Hero 1 and the others? Zhang Xiaohua was a little nervous. Needless to say, they are all very good. Xiaohua, second brother, I really want to thank you. Zhang Xiaohu said sincerely. Second brother, are you okay? You've only been reading for a few days and you're so emotional? Alas, nothing good comes out of a dog's mouth. Zhang Xiaohu said with a smile, you should read more books. Okay, I know. Zhang Xiaohua said impatiently, if there's nothing else, second brother, then I'll go back to Lingxiang Peak. Now. Zhang Xiaohu looked at the sky outside and said, it's not early anymore. How can you rush back to Lingxiang Peak? It's better to rest here for the night and leave tomorrow. No, it's still early. I can make it. Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua so sure, Zhang Xiaohu was suspicious. You won't sleep at night? Sleep? But it's still early. I'll sleep when I get back to Lingxiang Peak. But Zhang Xiaohu was still puzzled. This place is so far from Lingxiang Peak. Forget it, second brother. I won't explain to you. I'm leaving. I'll come back when I come back from outside. Zhang Xiaohua said and shrank into the ground, disappearing without a trace. Good, she can go back to Lingxiang Peak at night? What ability does Xiaohua have? When the time comes, I'll have to ask him to teach me. Zhang Xiaohu was not surprised to see Zhang Xiaohua disappear. He only secretly coveted Zhang Xiaohua's ability to come and go quickly. The night of Lingxiang cult was no longer the same as before. On the mountain path and in the forest, there were some hidden sentries. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense was not suppressed by the restriction. The range of his vision had greatly increased. He had already seen everything clearly. While sighing at Lingxiang cult's cautiousness, he concealed himself and directly returned to Lingxiang Peak. On the second day, Zhang Xiaohua finished his routine homework. He held the great wisdom sword and stayed at the door of the small house. Previously in the thick earth palace in the ruins of Huan, the shocking staff of the mysterious stone statue had left a deep impression on him. It was a supreme technique to use strength to overcome the enemy. Zhang Xiaohua had long wanted to comprehend it. However, later on he comprehended the sword of the world and put it aside. Now that he was about to leave the mountain, he still had to use the guise of martial arts. This method of using strength to subdue people still needed to be considered. Meng was also sensible. She did not come during the day so as not to disturb Zhang Xiaohua's cultivation. She only came at night. Once she saw Zhang Xiaohua, she asked curiously, "You're a strange person. How did you know that senior brother she would not be able to come back in time? Just now, the cult leader sent a decree to let me prepare. If there are no unforeseen events tomorrow, I'll go out with you the day after tomorrow. Hee, isn't that good? Isn't it what you and I want to join hands in Jianghu?" But Meng's face was slightly red. "My martial arts are weak and your martial arts are about the same. If we go out together, won't we be laughed at?" Zhang Xiaohua disagreed. "We're going to deliver the invitation, not to fight. When two countries are at war, they don't kill the envoys. What can they do to us? I reckon that the cult leader is thinking the same thing. That's why he sent you and me." "If that's the case, then I'm relieved." Meng patted her slightly towering chest with a relaxed expression. Zhang Xiaohua stared blankly at Meng. Meng suddenly woke up and rebuked, "What are you looking at?" "Nothing, nothing. I just want to touch the side of your armpit." Meng's face looked as though it was dripping blood. She slapped Zhang Xiaohua's hand and pretended to be angry. "What kind of thoughts are you having?" Meng Qi quickly walked away. Zhang Xiaohua laughed mischievously. She threw the great wisdom sword aside and followed behind Meng Qi. On the third day, as Zhang Xiaohua expected, Shi Mujuan, the eldest disciple of the dead elder Jing Gang of Ruijin Hall, did not return to Lingxiang Peak in time. The task of delivering the invitation to the Dalan Temple fell on Zhang Xiaohua's shoulders. In Mo Xian's palace, Zhang Xiaohua received an ordinary dark green jade and asked curiously, "This? Cult leader, are you sure? This is the invitation? Is it for my traveling expenses?" Nun Jingyi did not speak. Qin Qin, who was beside her, laughed out loud. "You idiot, of course this is the invitation. It's just that you don't understand." Meng, who was standing behind Zhang Xiaohua, blushed a little. Zhang Xiaohua smiled embarrassedly and was about to put the jade away when Nun Jingyi said, "Ren Xiaoyao, what? Does cult leader have any other orders?" Zhang Xiaohua raised her head and asked. Nun Jingyi looked at Meng, who was supposed to be standing in front of Zhang Xiaohua. She opened her mouth but shook her head. She waved her hand and said, "It's nothing. You can go now. Be careful. By the way, you have to personally hand this invitation to the Dalan Temple's elder. Once you receive the elder's reply, come back immediately." "Yes, disciple understands." "Oh, by the way, the Dalan Temple's previous abbot, Master Yuan Tian, was taken care of by our cult when he was alive. If you have the opportunity, please pay your respects on behalf of our cult." "Disciple understands." Zhang Xiaohua nodded. Of course, the journey of a peacock and a swallow was different, so there was no need to explain it here. Zhang Xiaohua and Meng left Lingering Fragrance Peak with sweet smiles on their faces. Zhang Xiaohua was still the same as before, while Meng was riding a pure white steed. Meng originally didn't wear a veil, but due to the Cult of Fragrance's rules, Nun Jingyi still gave her a veil to cover her face before leaving the mountain. Riding a pure white steed was a graceful woman wearing a light purple palace dress. Looking from afar, she exuded a mysterious aura. Unconsciously, Zhang Xiaohua, who had just left Lingering Fragrance Peak, sneered, "Actually, there's no need for anyone to accompany you. Just this outfit alone is enough for everyone to know you're a disciple of the Cult of Fragrance. Who would dare bully you?" Meng rebuked, "What? You haven't even left the mountain and you're already tired of it? How about I go back right now? Let you have some peace and quiet?" "I know. Don't tell me you want to take this opportunity to leave the valley and meet that Rejuvenation Valley's Miss Nia?" Zhang Xiaohua's face immediately turned green. She shut her mouth tightly and didn't speak again. After walking for a while, she heard Meng laugh. "Xiaohua, don't tell me I hit the nail on the head? Are you thinking about those sweet moments?" "Big sister, please spare me. When did I have any sweet moments with little Fishinia?" Zhang Xiaohua begged for mercy. "I only heard you mention it and only then did I remember. Didn't the cult leader say he was going to punish Rejuvenation Valley? I don't know how he did it. I'll be too embarrassed to meet her in the future." "And you do have some conscience to think of Rejuvenation Valley's consolation. Didn't the cult leader say he was going to be lenient? It shouldn't be a big deal. I didn't make any serious inquiries, but I vaguely heard my senior sisters mention it. It's just a punishment that's all bark and no bite." "Well, that's good. But why didn't your senior sisters say it more clearly? AI Rejuvenation Valley is only a small sect. How could it be worthy of the cult leader's attention? Even senior sisters only heard it by accident. Who would have the patience to talk about it in detail?" Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. That's right, Rejuvenation Valley was important in her eyes, but what about the disciples of Fragrance Cult? Even the disciples of Wuming Hall looked down on it, let alone the disciples of Emotian Palace. She wanted to get information from Meng Heng, but it was tantamount to asking the blind. Meng Heng glanced at her and said with a smile, according to the cult leader's map, we need to pass by Emotian City. Why don't we go and take a look? Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. She waved her hand and said, no need, no need. Let's take a detour. No way, Xiaohua, if you don't have any ulterior motives, Rejuvenation Valley sent you to Fragrance Cult. Now that you've returned, you should at least go and thank them. Being ungrateful isn't your style. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know what to say. Chapter 959. Zhang Xiaohua and Dream rode their horses because they wanted to see the scenery. If it wasn't for the fact that Zhang Xiaohua had to sleep on time, they would have traveled day and night. Even so, it only took them a few days to reach Jinghai Lake. Before they could see the Jinghai Lake, there were many disciples of the Wuming Hall patrolling the mountain path. Luckily, Ming was wearing a palace dress and a white veil. The disciples of the Wuming Hall knew that she was an inner disciple, so they were very respectful to her. Zhang Xiaohua also benefited a lot, so there were fewer checks. When they arrived at the mountain next to Jinghai Lake, they were stopped by another group of disciples. They respectfully asked, "Excuse me, senior sister, and senior brother, where are the two of you going on official business?" Dream looked at them and didn't answer. Zhang Xiaohua walked forward with her 4 odd beasts. She cupped her fists and said, "I'm Rin Xiaoyao, a disciple of Lingxiang Peak. I'm accompanying this senior sister from Mo Shui Gong to the Dalan Temple. Junior brothers, please make way." Dalan Temple? The disciples were very surprised and showed envy on their faces. The leader walked forward and said respectfully, "Senior Marshal Brother Ren, this job is really good. Since the opening of Jinghai Lake, the sect master hasn't sent any disciples out. You're the first one." Zhang Xiaohua and Dream looked at each other and smiled. There will always be a first. There will be more in the future. I think in a few days, there will be senior sisters going to the Tenryu sect and the Righteous Alliance. Is that so? The disciple didn't understand and said flatteringly, then, "Senior Brother Ren, I'm just curious. Why are you, inner disciples, going to these big sects? Can you tell us?" "Aha, not only that. I'm afraid there will be many inner disciples visiting the famous sects in Jianghu." The disciple was so curious that he was about to scratch his head. What on earth happened? Zhang Xiaohua pondered for a moment and said in a low voice, "Junior brother, I think you're pleasing to the eye, so I'm only telling you. Please don't tell anyone else or else. I won't say it. Senior brother Rin, I have a nickname which is Taciturn Gourd. I'm the best at keeping secrets. Just tell me, I definitely won't leak it out." "Okay, then come closer." "What? They're going to hold a martial arts convention?" The disciple almost jumped up and blurted out. Zhang Xiaohua's expression changed. "Junior Marshal Brother, why are you beaming with joy? This isn't something an expert would do. Haha, it's been a long time since I've seen something exciting. This is the legendary martial arts conference. How can I not be excited?" "Alright, I still have to hurry." "You," the disciple shouted, "Junior brothers, hurry up and make way. Senior brother Ren from the inner sanctum has something important to do." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and cupped her hands. Then she left with Meng. After entering the valley and seeing the calm Jinghai Lake, Meng complained, "How can you casually tell the outer sanctum disciples about this kind of thing?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "There are only 3 months until the martial arts convention. We still have to rely on the outer sanctum disciples to work. How can Lord Sect Leader not tell them in advance? Moreover, there will be a lot of Ruijin Palace disciples going out in the future. How long can this kind of thing be kept a secret? I'm just a few days ahead of schedule." "You're always right." Meng curled her lips. At this time, there were more than a dozen medium-sized boats on the Jinghai Lake. When they saw Zhang Xiaohua and Meng coming over, a few disciples who were controlling the boats hurriedly came down. After asking about the situation and checking their waist tags, the disciple said respectfully, "Senior brother and senior sister, please board the boat. We will send you over." "Over?" Meng was stunned. She looked at the wide Jinghai Lake and asked curiously, "How do we get out?" The disciple who was controlling the boat pointed to the other side of the Jinghai Lake and said with a smile, "Okay, senior sister knows that there is a mountain ridge on the other side of the Jinghai Lake. Under the mountain ridge, There is a hidden waterway that leads to the outer sanctum Dianchi Lake. We discovered it after the sect-protecting Grand Formation was opened. The Jinghai Lake was quite big. There were dozens of similar boats shuttling back and forth on the lake. After traveling for half a day, they arrived in front of a towering mountain ridge. Below the mountain ridge was a pitch-black cave. The water of the Jinghai Lake was flowing leisurely. Zhang Xiaohua had already released her divine sense, so she could see the place clearly. Below the mountain ridge, in the cave, there was also a large lake which was connected to Dianchi Lake on the other side of the mountain ridge. In the past, Yu Mingxin of the Fragrant Cult and Yang Haoya of the Misty School used this water to connect the two lakes with a restriction formation. Meng sat on the boat. With the help of the torch of the disciple who was controlling the boat, she could see the cave clearly. The cave was very low, hanging over their heads. The undulating cave top had protruding sharp stones from time to time. The sharp stones were like reefs in the water, covered with a lot of moss and unusually wet. Seeing that Meng was very interested, the disciple who was controlling the boat explained, "Senior sister and senior brother, the water level of the two lakes is not high on normal days, so it can reveal the passage. A few days ago it was a full moon, so the water level was extremely high, submerging the passage under the water. Although we had the hint of the inner sanctum disciples, we still searched for a long time without any results. Later, when the water level dropped, we found the passage. Presumably, in the past, the Fragrant Cult could only travel together on the night of the full moon for the same reason. Junior brother, you're right. We think so too." Zhang Xiaohua responded with a smile. The passage under the mountain ridge was also very long. After traveling for an hour, there was light outside and they entered Dianchi Lake. Dianchi Lake was almost the same as Jinghai Lake, and the surrounding mountains were also similar. Meng had long been amazed by it. Zhang Xiaohua released her divine sense and saw that the other side of Dianchi Lake was different from before. There were tents and simple caves which were all set up. Many outer sanctum disciples were holding weapons and walking in a hurry. When the boat reached the shore, the outer sanctum disciples on duty looked back. They did not feel strange and only focused on the outside of the valley. When Zhang Xiaohua and Meng got off the boat, the disciple who was controlling the boat tidied up a little and did not return. He stopped the boat not far away. "Senior sister, may I ask, what business do you have?" Zhang Xiaohua raised her head and saw a thin disciple walking quickly in front of her. His face was respectful and somewhat surprised. Zhang Xiaohua took a step forward, took out her waist token and said with a smile, "I'm Ren Xiaoyao, a disciple of Mo Xiangong. I'm accompanying this senior sister on business outside the valley." "Outside the valley?" The disciple frowned and said with an embarrassed face, "Senior brother Ren, please wait here. I'll go and ask the inner sanctum disciples to come over." Inner sanctum disciples? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. She looked at the place where the disciple used his lightness skill and scanned with her divine sense. Yes, outside the valley there were also some disciples on guard in different places. Looking at their clothes, they were the disciples of Ruijin Palace. Zhang Xiaohua suddenly understood. She turned back and said with a smile, "Let's go. We don't need to act like a disciple of Mo Xiangong." In the eyes of outer sanctum disciples, whether it's Ruijin Palace or Mo Xiangong, they are all inner sanctum disciples. Meng curled her lips and said, "It's up to you." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and didn't say anything. She lifted her feet and walked out of the mountain. Not long after, a disciple of Ruijin Palace followed the disciple of Wuming Hall. When the disciple saw Zhang Xiaohua from afar, he took a deep breath and said with an embarrassed face, "I was wondering who it was. It turns out, it's junior brother Ren." Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head. Needless to say, this guy's weapon must have been broken when she went up the mountain. She cupped her hands and said, "Cough cough. It turns out, it's the senior brother of Ruijin Palace. I'm sent by the hierarch to deliver a letter to the Dalan Temple. Senior brother, please check the waist token." The disciple looked at Meng and asked in a low voice, "Junior brother Ren, this senior sister." "He, this is senior sister Zixia from Mo Xiangong. Do you want to see the waist token?" "Zixia?" The disciple was stunned again. There was admiration and jealousy in his eyes. However, he still said, "This is my duty. Please don't blame me." Why would Meng talk to him? She raised her hand and threw the waist token to Zhang Xiaohua. After the disciple checked the waist token, he respectfully returned it to Zhang Xiaohua and said with a smile, "Junior brother Ren, you're the first group to leave the valley. Therefore I have to be careful." Then he looked at the two of them and said, "Junior brother Ren, the Jianghu is not like the valley. You have to be careful. Many situations can't be solved by force. You have to be careful of unorthodox methods. When the disciple saw that Zhang Xiaohua and Meng were young, he wanted to protect them. As he led the two of them out of the valley, he told them about the things to pay attention to in the Jianghu. They walked very far. Before he finished, Zhang Xiaohua was touched. She bowed and thanked him. "Thank you, senior brother, for your guidance. I've benefited a lot. When I return from the Dalan temple, I'll thank you in person." "You're too kind." The disciple shook his head. "Junior brother Ren is the strongest person in the incense cult. In terms of martial arts, you're definitely 100 times stronger than me. However, in the Jianghu, you don't just look at martial arts. I've also left the valley in my early years. That's why I have some experience." After saying so much, junior brother Ren still remembers it in your heart. "Of course, you can understand, but you have to rely on yourself for everything." "Yes, I understand," Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile. "All right, let's not talk about it anymore." The disciple pointed with his finger and said, "If you follow this road, you'll reach Macho City. There's a fork in the road that leads to Shiyuan City in the north. If junior brother Ren wants to go to the Dalan temple, it's better to go through Shiyuan City." Before Zhang Xiaohua could say anything, she felt Meng's bright eyes behind her. She could only smile and say, "Thank you, senior brother, for your guidance. Goodbye." The two of them set off. Meng laughed and said, "How is it? Junior brother Ren, are you going to Shiyuan City or Macho City?" Zhang Xiaohua said seriously, "Isn't that nonsense? Our mission is the Dalan Temple, not Rejuvenation Valley. Naturally, we'll go through Shiyuan City." "Are you sure?" "Of course." Zhang Xiaohua patted her chest. "What a pity." Meng pursed her lips and said, "I don't know if it's as you wish or not, but we have to go to Carefree City." That you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.